this evening by introduction of members and establishing a quorum. For the record, I'll introduce those at the front table. I think most of you know most of the individuals here. To my right, your left, is, of course, Ms. Carly Marshall, who's the Gettysburg Planning Director. Deb English is not present today, but Carly, being a staff member of the borough, would have the right then to participate in our discussions if it merited it. She is not a voting member of the HARB board, of course. Karen Mesher is a planning management assistant for the borough and a major planning assistant with our board and record keeper. Again, full participant in discussions. If she needs to have something clarified, she will ask. Not a voting member of the board. We will be doing something a little different tonight in that we'll be asking people to speak from the podium for the benefit of the television and public coverage. And I know there's going to be some statements made. Our questioning will, of course, be directed from our seats here. And we can decide as we go on whether the answers need to come from the podium or not. The Adams County television coverage is a change for us, so we'll try to make that effective for them and all people who will be viewing that. The members of the board, to my right, Ms. Joan Hodges, Mr. Paul Witt, Mr. Brandon Stone, who is the committee vice chairman. I'm Gary Schaefer, I serve as chair. Ms. Suzanne Christensen, and Mr. Clem Malott. There are 6 members present, so that establishes the quorum. The necessary quorum is 4 for our board. Are there any corrections or additions to the agenda? I have none. Are there any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes of March 15th? 2023. Yes.
Page 2, talk spelled wrong. C-A-L-K should be C-A-U-L-K.
Okay.
Not the end of the world, but.
You can circle it on there.
We'll correct that. All right.
Gary,
We actually
the November.
we actually have reviewed the November
Okay.
minutes previously, but we're in the same bind. I'm not going to vote on them because we have to have 4 members, a majority to approve. We have to have 4 members that were present at that meeting, and we do not have 4 members here tonight that were present at that meeting. So we'll have to see how to go about entering that officially in our record, because we will not have 4 members of the board who were present. There were only 4 of us at that meeting. So, and we did review and made comments that and could not vote to approve. I will now ask for a motion to approve the meeting agenda then, since there were no additions or corrections.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then we have the approval of the March 15th, 2023 minutes with the minor correction. Is there a motion to enter the minutes as corrected as the official record of this board's March meeting?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor
Aye.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, no opposition. We'll enter those as the official record. All right, so this, I'll have to actually think a minute here as we go to item 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. And this would be a time for somebody to speak.
We do. Hold it, please.
It's not really a public thing, but. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Fitzpatrick, and I'm a resident of the borough. I'm not sure why it didn't make the agenda for today, but I wanted to let you all know today is Paul Witt's birthday. And all of his people are abroad. He's alone. And so I thought it would be nice if we all just addressed him and said happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Paul.
I'm glad she respected you enough not to have us sing. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda from anyone else? All right. So we have time for public comment for items on the agenda. We would normally say this is for a chance for people not directly involved in the presentation to speak to the items on the agenda. I'm going to assume, looking at the audience, that everybody here is in favor of supporting the Gettysburg Welcome Center, so I don't know that I have anybody to speak in opposition. So I'm just going to have all those related to that item on the agenda speak when that item of the agenda comes up at the first part, rather than at this point. Is there anyone else speaking to the other item on the agenda? We now have applications for review, the new business, the major project. We have 33 West Middle Street. David Rawlings is generally representing that project, and I know David, and I see he's not present. So we will simply pass on that, unless someone's here to represent 33. No?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a
Yes.
question? I'm here for number 6, but you skipped it.
No, it'll be-
Item 5 above number 6 is new business, applications for initial
I'm
review.
sorry, my mistake.
Then we go to item
My
A.
apologies.
So we know you're here.
Okay.
We'll pass on item A. In case David shows up, then we'll review it at the end of the meeting. And we'll move on to item B, the critical project, 340 Baltimore Street, Borough of Gettysburg. We're going to, our normal procedure is to read background information on a project and then allow the owner, contractor, whomever, to make a presentation. We'll follow that procedure, and then the board questions in order, trying to clarify any issues on the application or determine its merit. We follow a quasi-parliamentary procedure because we are an advisory board. We are not the deciding board. We advise the Borough Council. We act in an advisory capacity, and we try to work with people to make recommendations for projects that a certificate of appropriateness can be issued for. That being said, I'm going to read the background information for 340 Baltimore Street, Borough of Gettysburg. Of course, the project scope is for a wholesale demolition of the existing two-story wood frame residential dwelling, and in the long run to construct a welcome center open to the public. The history: the building was first shown on the Sanborn fire insurance maps in 1912 as a two-story frame dwelling with a two-story wide porch, a two-story rear frame building with a one-story frame porch on the south side facing the rear of the building. All roof material is noted on those drawings as shingled. Many of the historic features of the building have been covered by installed exterior siding. However, the original windows are intact, and the building, be a modest and simple folk Victorian structure, never had a lot of architectural embellishment. The original roof has been replaced with ribbed metal roofing and has snowbirds on that. The permit history was such that in 2018, a demolition permit was pulled after it had been submitted for the building. And then only in 2021, a banner permit was submitted, and then this recent demolition permit. We'll use that as our background. We will probably get additional background from those who make presentations, and therefore I'll go to the comments, both public and specific to the project.
For the presentation.
Thank you for letting us address the HARB this evening. My name is Charles Gable. I'm the Gettysburg Borough Manager. I am representing the applicant, a little town called Gettysburg, what former Mayor Troxel affectionately referred to as the best-known small town in the world. This has been a multi-year effort to bring this project to the point where we're at this evening. I wanted to recognize some of the folks in red shirts in the gallery tonight, because this is kind of the steering group, which essentially led to the application that we're going to discuss here tonight. We have a subcommittee that's leading this through Main Street Gettysburg. Skip Hockley is the chair of that subcommittee, so thanks for joining us tonight, Skip. Pete Mealy with the Lutheran Theological Seminary. Wendy Flack, staff member at Main Street Gettysburg. We have Timbrel and Scott Wallace, Downtown Merchants Nerd Herd, oh man, and Lark. And I think there's some other exciting things in the work there. We have Carl Peterzak with Destination Gettysburg and Jackie White with Dobbin House. So thank you all for joining us this evening. This presentation, this effort, this project would not be possible without the leadership of these folks in attendance tonight, so I want to thank them. So we have actually a three-part presentation this evening. I will be presenting the executive summary, if you will, the 30,000-foot view of this project. Connor File is our architect. He's with Crabtree, Rohrbaugh and Associates, and Jill Sellers, president of Main Street. Connor File will talk about the specifics of what will be proposed as a construction on the site, and Jill Sellers will talk about the vision, the overall way that this project fits into the greater scheme of Gettysburg and its tourist economy. So, and then of course we'll have the opportunity for questions at the end of our discussion here. Wanted to give a context of where this sits for folks at home that might not be familiar with it. These two slides represent the Gettysburg Gateway Connectivity Project. I'm not here to talk about that tonight. However, this project, the demolition and the construction of the Welcome Center, is really a corollary to this larger $12 million revitalization project on the entire Baltimore Street corridor from the borough limit to the south to the Gettysburg train station to the north. This project essentially sits right in the middle of that geographic 1 mile stretch of real estate. The slide here below, you see the star, that's 340 Baltimore Street. This is just an artist's rendition of what that potentially could look like. For those not familiar with the Gateway project, essentially what this will do, it'll mimic the streetscape that currently exists on Steinway Avenue. We'd like to bring that theme to the entire length of the borough from the cemetery through Lincoln Square. Just another perspective on what we're talking about here, and 340 Baltimore Street sits right here. Notice that, we'll talk about this in a little bit, conveniently located to a large public parking location, which will come into handy as we discuss this in greater detail. There are several criteria that an applicant can look at when they're requesting a relief for demolition of a site. And when the borough considered what we would be asking relief for, we actually just ignored 2 and 3. 2, because the building, honestly, up front with you, is structurally sound. It's not in danger of collapsing. It's not a safety issue for the greater public. So we're not asking for relief under that section. Neglect, the borough has owned the property since 2018, actually technically December of 2017. And the borough has been maintaining that. Now, obviously, the borough did not invest in rehabilitating the structure, but there have been some utilities that remain connected to the structure. The borough has made sure that it's safe, meaning it's not accessible to the public for bad things to happen, and we've maintained the grounds. The borough could ask for relief under what's known as unreasonable economic hardship. And the reason for that is in the HARB application that you received a couple weeks ago, you'll see a report from a structural engineer that the borough engaged back in 2018. And that engineer noted, quote, home dramatically slopes from front to back approximately 11 inches. And for those who have been in it, you know this all too well. You frankly feel like you've imbibed a little bit on an evening on a Friday, because it gives you a little tipsy feeling when you're walking around in there. That's a very noticeable slope in the building. And so the structural engineer noted that excavating and underpinning the foundation walls is difficult to a point where it would not be economically feasible, meaning that there would be more resources required to rehabilitate the structure than to essentially demolish it. The other consideration there is it would be very difficult to use this structure in a commercial setting that the borough would like to use this. And Connor Fowle, the architect, can speak a little bit more to that in detail when he presents. So we're actually looking for relief under Part 4, which is substantial public benefit. I hope that after our discussion here this evening, the board would agree with this committee that a new structure on the site would substantially outweigh the contributions of the current structure to the historic district. And it's under Section 4 that the borough is seeking relief tonight for demolition. Certificate of Appropriateness. This slide is essentially, there's some architect renditions here. Connor Fowle will be talking more about these in detail. I just put those there to kind of whet the appetite a little bit about what's coming up with his presentation. So from a 30,000-foot view level, this group here with us today, a little background on that. The need for this project was identified through a series of community meetings beginning in 2017, which included more than 80 local officials, business, civic, and nonprofit organizations, and residents alike. In response, the property at 340 Baltimore Street was generously donated to the borough of Gettysburg for the specific purpose of creating a welcome center in the heart of Gettysburg's historic district. The group collaboratively came up with a purpose for this project, and it's because Gettysburg's major economic driver is tourism, focused on history in particular. Baltimore Street plays a major role in moving people to experience the historic attractions and unique places of interest and education, and therefore, its health is critical to economic survival. The Gettysburg Welcome Center is an essential component of Baltimore Street to help attract new businesses, increase local jobs, create access to transportation, and also improve the economy of adjacent low-income neighborhoods. The Welcome Center project is estimated to create 5 to 10 full-time jobs or 15 to 20 part-time jobs, as well as contracted support for custodial and maintenance requirements. Its completion will uphold the vitality of the borough's historic district for the next generation of visitors, businesses, and residents alike. The concept is built around 4 key principles. Essentially, the first being public restrooms. The lack of public restrooms is a major issue in a destination that welcomes over 3 million visitors each year. Presently, finding a public restroom is a challenge and puts a strain on Gettysburg's local businesses. Establishing this resource is vital for downtown residents, visitors, and businesses. The facility will be ADA compliant, accessible to everyone, and will include changing stations for families. The project is designed to encourage the walkability of the historic district by tourists and local residents by providing this essential amenity, thus enabling and extending accessibility to retail shops, restaurants, events, and civic services. It's also going to be an information hub. This public building will provide event, educational, and transportation information for both locals and visitors, as well as tourist information. It will be a centralized location to find out about local projects and opportunities, including how to volunteer in the community. There will be community space available in the facility as well. The location is set perfectly between Steinway Avenue and Lincoln Square and provides a unique opportunity to create a landmark in the heart of downtown. Partnership considerations include local organizations such as Main Street Gettysburg, Destination Gettysburg, Gettysburg Foundation, Gettysburg National Military Park, and others to staff the facility and represent Gettysburg as a seamless destination. Volunteers will also be invited to help as they can share local events and traditions, historic information, and volunteer opportunities, as well as insights on living, working, and playing in historic Gettysburg. And finally, it's also going to be a transportation hub. Since the property is uniquely positioned near the midpoint between Lincoln Square and the north and Soldiers National Cemetery to the south, the Gettysburg Welcome Center will also serve as a multimodal transportation hub. The Welcome Center will function as a stop for public transportation, rapid transit. Visitors will be encouraged to park their vehicles at public accessible parking lots immediately to the rear of the building and travel the historic district either on foot or by bicycle, or if you'd like to use the bus, you can do that as well from this location. The next several slides is very text intensive, so we're not going to go through a lot of that in detail. There's more pictures on here which folks may find interesting, and the HARB board has this. This is actually pulled from our application. So the first couple points here just identifies who owns the parcel's tax number. The date it was acquired officially by the borough was the 29th of December 2017. Folks at home might be interested to know that this asset for the borough currently has a land valuation of $36,300. Its improved value is $139,100, giving the total parcel's assessed valuation at $175,400. And just for reference purposes, over here you can see this is the side of the building and then some Google Maps to help you orient yourself. Next couple slides. This is a slide of the north-facing facade. So you can see it's just a wood brown structure. The one next to it is the rear-facing, south-facing facade. Of note here, there is a very nice stone basement, which Jill Sellers might address a little bit in her presentation. Over here to the right is another view of the masonry work in the stone basement. Some dilapidated steps that go up to the back porch. And these slides here are really interesting because this is kind of the first view that many folks get of the interior of the structure. And you can see here this one here in the middle on the right is the center room on the first floor looking east into the rear room or the kitchen. The one down here is the wall of the rear room or the kitchen, first floor looking north. can see that's a very old, dilapidated style kitchen. The interior of the front room, here's your front door. Of note here, you can see there's nothing particularly appealing about the interior of the structure with the drop ceilings and the obviously very dated decorations in there. Next slide. Again, we talk about some of the staircase here going to the second floor. And these are pictures of the basement. You can see the stonework from the inside as well. Nothing special about the basement. There's just some mechanical systems down there. Back up a little bit. The last slide here, there are no pictures, but I wanted to address some things that don't have red check boxes, because when the HARB board received this application, the Planning Commission hadn't quite yet finished a report on this. So I'm going to address these sections right here. With reference to the maintenance of the building, I mentioned the borough has been maintaining this building in status quo repair. So obviously there's been no improvements made since acquisition, but we made sure that it doesn't become a public hazard at the same time. As such, the borough did not neglect this property, and there are currently no current or previous code violations or citations associated with the structure. So that concludes my portion of this presentation. Again, that was kind of the executive summary, the big picture view. Connor File with Crabtree Rohrball Associates is next. He's going to really make this interesting because I think you're going to enjoy some of his show and tell.
Thanks, Charles. That's just the pointer.
Pointers.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Connor File. I'm the project architect with Crabtree Rohrball and Associates out of Mechanicsburg. I also happen to be a lifelong resident of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. We have partnered with the Borough of Gettysburg and Main Street on the Gettysburg Welcome Center. And right now, the civil and structural engineer on the project is C.S. Davidson, which is also based out of Gettysburg. I'll start with some of the existing conditions here just to kind of paint the picture of the context of where 340 Baltimore Street sits. So you can notice here that there's a lot of two-story to three-story structures in this area, and there's a rhythm to the streetscape. These photos show the rear yard that Charles also had photos of, a little more clear, but you can see the dilapidated rear porch, sort of the narrow, tall posture of the existing building, the simple gable roof, the simple ornamentation, vinyl siding, etc. The backyard at the moment is basically a blank slate. This is difficult to see, but this is an existing condition survey that was completed by C.S. Davidson that identifies all of the structures and utilities on the building, as well as a channel that runs through the rear of the building. It's a run. C.S. Davidson also completed surveys at the neighboring two parcels on either side just a few weeks ago to survey their existing conditions of their foundations, etc., to make sure that if this project, when it moves forward, that we're taking into consideration the neighboring historic buildings and that we can plan for that in construction to not have an impact on their properties. As Charles mentioned, here's a slide of where the location of the building is, and I think the thing to note here is this is highlighting the main pedestrian thoroughfare of downtown Gettysburg. And if you've spent any time on Baltimore Street, it's very obvious the amount of traffic that flows up and down that street and the hordes of folks every evening that are taking ghost tours, etc. It really doesn't matter if it's the summer or winter time. There's a lot of activity on Baltimore Street all hours of the day and night. And as you can see, this is a central location between downtown Gettysburg and Steinway Avenue and the park beyond that can really be a focal point of the downtown for that pedestrian and community access. A few more aerial shots that just shows again the context of the immediate block that surrounds 340 Baltimore Street, and noting some of the parking in the rear. Mr. G's and Reed's Wineries, as well as the escape room, are to the south side of the site, And then there's a series of residential buildings to the north side of the site before you get up to Dr. Wetzel's office. It becomes commercial again. So it's a hybrid between commercial and residential in this district. Again, some project location shots. So I've been involved in this project for over 5 years and have been part of a lot of these conversations and envisioning of what this project can be, from, going through scenarios of trying to maintain the existing building, envisioning what that could be, adding on to the existing building, demolishing the existing building, new construction, etc. And some of the things that I referenced as I've been working on the design of this project was a few different guidelines, one being the Gettysburg guidelines, as well as pulling from the Washington, D.C. guidelines and the Harrisburg historic guidelines about some of the considerations that should be taken whenever designing a new building in a historic town, because obviously that's a big question. What should a new building look like in arguably one of the most famous small historic towns, in America? So we try to take a lot of sensitivity to the area and the place and what that could look like and envision that into a new facility that would, serve the public. So new construction can be a positive contribution to a historic district. It should be sympathetic to the existing historic buildings. It should be inspired by the surrounding buildings. It should blend into the existing built environment and not be an intrusion. It should not detract from the general historic character of the area. New construction shouldn't replicate neighboring historic buildings, and it should reflect its period of construction. The design of a new building is critical to preserving a historic district, and a new building should contribute to that character by respecting the location, design, materials, and other character-defining elements of the historic district and streetscape. It should be compatible with the existing environment without duplicating existing buildings. And I think this last point is interesting. By relating to the existing buildings and the environment, but being of its own time, a new building shows a district's evolution just as an existing building shows its past. So obviously this place isn't frozen in time. It needs to continue to evolve to support the local community and the needs of the visitors. So we're looking forward to what that possibility is. And on the right side here are just some key words that should be referenced for considering the design of a new building and how it relates to its site context. There's a few images here that I captured around town as I worked on the design in the last few years of just buildings that have a similar character to what was present at 340 Baltimore Street. There's something really interesting about the fact that it was a simple gable form that faced the street with the gable proud to the street. A lot of them are turn gables, etc. And it kind of has this 2.5-story typology, which there's other examples around town of that. And that helped inspire the design because the streetscape was already set by this structure. So the idea is how could we, reference that and maintain the streetscape, but providing a new facility for the program requirements. You also notice around downtown Gettysburg, is very defined by masonry brick buildings. A majority of the buildings in the downtown are brick clad. You'll notice here the simple roof forms, not a ton of ornamentation. These are residential buildings at one point historically. Some examples that were just inspiring of the way additions were added onto buildings in downtown Gettysburg. Most of the buildings started as the main structure, form, and then were added on over time as the needs evolved and became almost rambling. Some examples of storefronts, and again, this is looking forward to what the new design, some of the inspiration, some of the storefronts of downtown Gettysburg in the more commercial end of town. This is the proposed site plan, and I think what's to note here, it's a little difficult to see, but the site is obviously long and narrow. It's 30 feet wide, it's 143 feet long. So with the zoning setbacks, etc., the maximum width of this building is only 20 feet wide, which is pretty similar to what the existing house is at this point, the existing structure. So there's 5-foot setbacks on either side. Our building's 20 feet wide. Inside, it's only about 18 feet wide, which isn't a ton of real estate to be working with, which, given the program dictated the length of the building, it's pretty efficiently designed in the front of the building, and I'll go to the next floor plan with the the floor plan. In the front of the building, on the first floor, is the information center. It's a nice open space that has the ability to evolve over time and house a lot of different amenities, etc. And we're still working on some of that interior design with community members to envision how to kind of make the most out of that space. And then to the rear of the building is 5 accessible single-user restrooms that will have, as Charles mentioned, be accessible to families as well. There's a drinking fountain and a built-in bench, mechanical room, janitor's closet, and then a stair leading upstairs. That's really the floor plan. It's the information center and restrooms on the first floor serving the public space. One thing to note as well is we're utilizing the space in between the 2 buildings, that 5 feet, to create a sloped walkway that would be the accessible entrance into the building. So there's no need for handrails, guardrails, etc. It'll be a seamless, entrance into the building and avoid having steps and ramps on the front of the building. It also potentially has an entrance this could be closed off for after hours, depending on how, the borough plans on operating this building. Upstairs, coming in the rear entrance, is 3 offices, a break room / kitchenette, a restroom, and a conference room or office. So upstairs is office space and the first floor is the public space. And if I go back to the site plan real quick, I think something to mention is in the rear of the property, we're showing 3 parking spaces. There's a rear yard with a walkway that connects from the front to the rear of the site. There's a privacy fence and landscape buffering to the north, which is the residential side of the property, and then to the south is mostly commercial at this point. So that's sort of the lay of the land. And then you'll notice here as well, and you'll see in the renderings, the ability to kind of create a node with the outside new sidewalks that is in conjunction with the Gettysburg or Baltimore revitalization plan. The flat 2D elevations, you'll start to notice that the form of the building is fairly similar to what is existing today. It's almost just re-envisioned with a masonry facade, a storefront on the first floor, punched openings on the second floor, but very simple form and shape. But again, the masonry is very prevalent downtown and sort of has a nod to the civic public aspect of this property moving forward into the future. And in the rear, it's stepped down, this is the employee entrance. The side elevations, the south and north. You can see the south elevation. This is where that accessible entrance is, and a majority of the windows into the space facing south. And then on the north side is less windows, just a few into those office spaces on the second story. The facade is basically going to be masonry with a horizontal siding for the rear portion of it, have an asphalt shingle roof, half-round gutters. We're in conversations with Pella and Marvin Windows to find a compatible window that's appropriate for this particular project in the historic district. So there'll be more information on that. Now to the fun stuff, the renderings. So here is an example of what this could look like from Baltimore Street in a few years once that revitalization project happens as well, with the brick sidewalks that are widened. There's supposed to be vehicular sort of slowing devices within this, new lampposts, etc., benches. And as you zoom up on the building, you can start to see it has a similar form to what is currently standing there. It's gotten a facelift. And to Charles' point, one of the, talking about the existing building and why it's not feasible to retrofit that into this particular project. It's a wood frame building that slopes, like Charles said, almost a foot from front to rear. A lot of the structure the wood frame is bowed within that space. There's not a lot of things of character within the building that would be salvageable, but there may be a few things, as Jill will hint at. And it's not accessible. It's a few feet off of the ground. And for the potential for tens of thousands of visitors to pass through this space annually, it would take a substantial amount of work to half turn the existing building into what this has the potential to be for a similar amount of money. So this, just starting from a blank slate, we can fit the program of the building in there very efficiently. It'll have modern amenities and facilities, and that'll serve the community for a lot of decades moving forward. So that was the goal with this. Again, you can start to see its relationship to the houses on either side of it and how it still maintains a similar roof line and window openings to what is present on the street. But you start to see that there's the ability to have a node out front with informational directional signage, as well as benches, sort of a meeting space, a hub out front as folks go inside and use the restroom or find information, etc. And you'll start to see in this rendering, you'll start to see almost the alley way that's been created. That would be the accessible entrance or just the direct bathroom entrance as well. Rendering of the rear of the site, looking from Schoolhouse Alley, you can start to see the 3 parking spaces with the brick pathway that leads to the Baltimore Street entrance, and then the employee entrance. And it has almost a residential feel in the rear to be compatible with everything else that's happening on this block. This is an aerial view, so you can start to see the mass of the building in relationship to the neighborhood. A lot of the buildings have accessory structures in the rear of the site. Obviously, ours were not, which creates a little more green space. Again, another rear shot of the building, a bit more zoomed in so you can see what that looks like. This is the south elevation with a section below it, so you can start to see how the program stacks on top of each other. So on the first floor, you have the visitor information space, and the rear of the first floor is those restrooms. And then you start to see the stair, which actually begins in this addition and then runs up to the second story. So we made this building as compressed as possible to fit the program needs that the borough required within it. And we stepped the mass down as soon as possible to not have it be any larger than it needed to be. I wish this showed up a little better, but this is an attempt at an interior rendering. So we're still working through what this can exactly be, but the idea is it's a hub for information and an opportunity to learn about local businesses, events, et cetera, that are happening in downtown Gettysburg, and just be a 21st century space that visitors can come into and use the facilities and learn about what's happening in the downtown so that they can patronize those buildings. Looking the other way, back towards Baltimore Street, again, there's a lot of wall space within this, so we're still working, this is just one idea. We're working to figure out exactly how we can best utilize that interior space and what's the most appropriate design for the interior here. This is standing at this opening right here that leads to the restrooms in the rear. And the goal here was to make it light filled and not feel like just a long corridor that was kind of endless and dark and very utilitarian. So by, through the proper design, we were able to get light into this space at different points along the way. There's a drinking fountain, there's a built-in bench, and there's even the potential for like a donor wall or some type of mural behind the bench as well. Upstairs, this is a rendering looking upstairs, so it's a fairly simple layout, but it's an office, a kitchen break room, bathroom, mechanical, 2 offices, and a conference room at the end of the hallway. This is what that conference room could look like with a cathedral ceiling that would, the windows and the views would look directly out to Baltimore Street there. And then lastly, a few night shots. So I think what's interesting about this is to kind of see what this could look at night with the storefront and the windows, and it could really almost have that a lantern effect, become kind of a beacon and a focal point even into the nighttime in downtown as folks are passing by. So I think it would illuminate the street in a really beautiful way and be a welcoming presence downtown as you arrive into the downtown. So and that concludes my presentation. Thanks. And lastly, we have Jill Sellers of Main Street.
Okay, one more. Okay. Thanks, Carly.
Hello, I'm Jill Sellers, president of Main Street Gettysburg. So I'm just going to address the community and our portion of how we came to partner with this opportunity. So Main Street Gettysburg, our mission, we work with all community partners, businesses, organizations, our focus is Gettysburg, preservation, rehabilitation, long-term improvement, and investment. So the goal is to keep a vibrant and growing economy, both for now and as we look forward. So we do that through long-range planning, business opportunities. We just did a Google workshop on Monday. We have a great grant opportunity through Main Street America and through Pennsylvania Downtown Center. We're bringing Google tools for free to small businesses in Adams County and Gettysburg. So looking at things like that help local businesses grow their opportunities. Investments, we look for opportunities to create things like the facade improvement program that's happening right now under Main Street Gettysburg. Grants, we do all sorts of grant writing on many different platforms to bring money and investment into the community. Services, we have lots of volunteer services and other things that we give back to the community by organizing those opportunities. Events, we do the Christmas Festival. We work with lots of other organizations and businesses and things that do events to bring people to our community and hopefully repeat visitors. And infrastructure projects. So Steinway Avenue is a great example. In conjunction with the Steinway bid, starting in 2009 to about 2015, that streetscape project happened, about an $8 million project renovating Steinway Avenue. So strategic planning is what we thrive on. So we're looking at a 30-year investment strategy. So going back to Steinway Avenue in 2009, and then looking down the road through this project as kind of a sub-project of the Baltimore Street revitalization program, and then looking forward from that to revitalizing Route 30 next. This is like a 30-year look down the road, is how we continually reinvest in ourselves to better the downtown. It's kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You start on one end and you finish, and then you go back to where you started and you do it again. This is just a continuous, so that's why we're always looking forward to make sure that we're leaving things better than when we found them, and we're preparing it for new generations. So Charles mentioned in 2017, those 80 folks that came together on the strategic planning effort identified public restrooms and access to local information as critical inefficiencies of our downtown. So that's the heart of this project. So reflecting on Gettysburg, major changes in the last 20 years that we've seen. So the Visitors Information Center that you see on the big blue state signs that say go to the train station to get information, that's been wrong for 21 years now. So we have no information downtown. Businesses do their best and they do a great job, but there is no centralized opportunity for that in the last 20 years. Then the Visitor Center moved out to Baltimore Pike. That created a serious strain, certainly on Steinway Avenue. Steinway Avenue reacted by creating the Business Improvement District, which revitalized and sustained that whole corridor for visitors and for tourism. And that was a cooperation, again, with the Steinway revitalization project that was completed, that $8 million project that you see still working well out there. So 2017, the borough got the property that we're talking about. And then, a recent change that we've seen is the opening of the new Historical Society Museum, which is, bringing amazing new traffic to here. So long-term investment is happening right now. So in the last 2 years, 16 new businesses have opened in the borough. Right now we're working, Main Street Gettysburg is doing a facade improvement program. $480,000 is being worked on right now. Those projects are happening within the next 4 months. So you're seeing that on Baltimore Street, at Gettysburg Community Theater, at the Arts Council, and many private businesses, J&P Winery, and lots of other places that are taking advantage of the fact that Main Street can help them to help their businesses so we'll make an investment, help them make a larger investment in themselves and in our downtown. Big change on the south end of town, the Gettysburg Bus Tour building, which you're very familiar with, but that's a huge investment, and we're going to see that as that's looking forward to provide new services for a new generations, plural, of visitors. And then the Ready project that's coming soon and going to be another big investment in the future of our downtown. So the vision for the Welcome Center, you've heard a lot of this, but it's the anchor of this strategic plan because it is in the heart of the historic district. It's a central location for information and bathrooms. So, raise your hand if you've ever been anywhere and you need a bathroom. This is a huge problem for businesses. It's a huge problem not only for our tourists that come here, but for our residents that come downtown for events and parades and football games and you name it. We don't have public restrooms downtown. Ask the library how much they want to keep spending on plumbing when they have their restrooms overrun for public events. This is much needed downtown. So the vision is to connect Steinway, Baltimore, Lincoln Square, again with that streetscape that's working in conjunction with the Baltimore Street project, which is on a track to hopefully take off following this project. And our goal at Main Street Gettysburg is that walkable and accessible historic district. So that's what was able to happen on Steinway Avenue, and if we can create that throughout, that's going to encourage downtown visitation, support of our local businesses and events, and it's good. We don't want empty storefronts. We want a vibrant economy because we live here and we want people to keep visiting. So here's the funding structure that we're looking at right now. So the building was donated. That's the value that Charles mentioned. We started a capital campaign in 21 and started with $15,000 in donations. In 22, we engaged with Connor File to start architecture renderings, and we were able to take in $102,000 for this project. It's in a restricted fund for this purpose. 2024. So currently this project is being considered, it's not actually, let me rephrase that. Currently this project is being written into the FY24 federal budget. As long as it stays there, we'll get that funding. The secondary plan is there's an American 250 PA infrastructure project plan. I am on that committee in Adams County and have been going to the hearings for that. So there's a couple of funding opportunities for construction. And then we have also a plan for an endowment campaign because we want to be able to not only build this, but also sustain it for its use for coming generations. So that's the operational plan. So we have a partnership with the borough, community organizations, and of course our volunteers who are fantastic. Sustainment is the endowment campaign, continued grant funding, and rental space upstairs that would help offset some of the cost, depending on how that ends up being available. A couple of things that we looked at in the building. So I've been talking with the neighbors and several of their folks about what that building was and is. At one time it was the Weinbreder Tannery, so really an opportunity to really showcase that. Of course it wasn't a home at the time of the battle, it was a property, and so we could highlight that history and what happened on that property during the battle. I've already been in contact with Adams County Historical Society as well as the Gettysburg Foundation to do rotational exhibits and other things that would bring items of interest to downtown and create visitation at their spaces as well. Preservation, cast iron grates, as I understand, in the basement are original to the house. I think we could incorporate those into a design somewhere, at least within maybe a display. I know the timbers in the basement could possibly be reused. This is out of my league, so I won't begin to tell you, but those are things that we've looked at. And then, of course, the stonework in the basement is period, and but that is being taken under consideration of how those could be incorporated. So the legacy, this is a legacy project. Essentially, we're creating an opportunity to prepare for future generations. Gettysburg is an interesting place because we kind of live with one foot in the past and one foot in the future, and we kind of straddle those two places. We have to preserve one and prepare for the other, and I think this does an amazing job of taking all those things into delicate consideration. So I'll wrap that up and turn it over for discussion.
All right. We've had the presentation of the management and architectural team. Any other presentations specific to that? Then I think I don't want to shortchange anybody, but I'll move to the questioning and our focus. Of course, as a historic architectural review board, we're considering the demolition of a historic structure. And we're also considering the design of the replacement building. So as much excitement as is generated by what you're planning to do there, our questions may come across as mundane as we focus on some of the architectural details. We'll see how that goes. And I'll begin the questioning with Joan, if you have.
I think you've done a really great job in putting it all together. You've caught everything. What I would like to see, well, first of all, we have to have this demolition thing filled out. So you better get cracking. That's got to be filled out. And the other thing is, as far as the stonework, if you're not going to use that, can you donate it? You know, all those things, if you could, you know, donate it out near Daniel Lady Farm.
Historic Gettysburg.
The historic, yeah. And at least that can be set forward, right? So I don't have any other questions. I think it looks very nice, and best of luck to you.
Paul?
I think it looks really good. Just one quick question. What's the ceiling height of the first floor of that?
The first floor is at 10 feet
10
tall,
feet.
and then the second floor is at 9 feet for the first 2/3, and then obviously it's shown with the cathedral ceiling in that conference room to vault the space up. But because we're sitting the building basically on a slab, it's going to be closer to the ground than the existing building currently is. So it's a fairly similar height to the ridge line of the existing building within, I guess, is within 2 feet.
Brandon?
I got a couple questions. So the first, in reviewing the actual detailed spec sheets in there is a reference to several alternatives. In particular, there is discussion of photovoltaic solar cells on the building. No one really addressed that possibility, and in that sheet, it was priced out. So is that still being considered?
I think so. That pricing exercise that you guys saw was from approximately 2 years ago. Right. And at that time, there was discussion about the potential for photovoltaics, because over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of discussion about what this building should be and all the things that can be. And so at one point, you know, it was sort of tacked on of, oh, there could be solar. But I think the intent as of now moving forward is that there will not be solar on this.
So is the plan being presented right now includes no solar?
Correct.
Those alternatives listed in there are just there for pricing?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. The next question I have is really in terms of, it's a comment more than anything else. I really like the overall consideration you gave to the R1 residential neighbor to the north. The idea of actually bounding them and giving them a sense of privacy to what is obviously a very public space, that consideration just helps engender a better community for everyone. So I like to comment that that is a really nice consideration. The other thing that I really want to sort of emphasize and go on Joan's comment is that the historic Gettysburg Adams County is our local salvage yard. An opportunity for them to potentially walk through the facility and see if there is anything that they would like to try to salvage before any potential demolition. I think that opportunity would give them a sense of what is possible. Like the floorboards up in the attic may be original floorboards, the grates, the stonework. There are elements in the building, even the window sashes appear in some aspects of the building to be fairly old. So there's an opportunity for the salvage yards to basically get new stock for their inventory as this. So I hope that as part of our consideration that we can enforce potentially a walkthrough so that we could actually see what salvage is available. And then the final thing, Connor, this is really sort of in reference to the windows of the building.
Of the proposed, sure.
In your description, you mentioned a Pella historic window, but that isn't actually a Pella line. Do you have a particular model, a style in space? Because there's a pretty big range in their window models.
Yeah, and I think this is something we continue to discuss. I mean, the idea right now is that it could potentially be an aluminum-clad wood window with real divided lights with the spacing, et cetera, to get a real mullion sort of look on that. And that's the intent. Some would be a casement type window so that it can have the thin profile, and then the rest would be basically fixed picture windows, but they would all look similar.
I personally,
so it's a thin profile and it's supposed to kind of accentuate the proportions of the building with the tall slenderness of it. Is the idea, the intent.
But as rendered right now, you went with a 2/2 pattern
Correct.
farmhouse style. Your intent would be to mimic that in any final. One of the challenges is proposals like this show a rendering, but it's difficult sometimes to actually see the final actual implementation.
Understood. That is the intent, Brandon, at the moment, is to have a 2/2 window that's very similar to what's represented. And again, that's sort of a balance between making it look kind of artificially historic versus being more contemporary. So we're looking for a balance there between having something with a lot more sort of mullions and broken down versus mullion-free design, I guess. So we felt like this was a nice compromise that helped accentuate the proportions of the building.
If you take the aging of the building, it is roughly an 1880, 1890s building, and that was the style at the time. So in some aspects, you're following the intent of an in-kind replacement, if you will. Normally, we talk about materials, and in this case, we're talking about an entire building, and I think you actually hit that on the head.
Yeah, thank you. It's not supposed to be a replication of any
No.
particular building. It's more of a synthesis of a lot of buildings you see downtown with, again, the storefront on the first floor, the sort of punched openings on the second floor, the simple roof form, the brick facade, et cetera. It's pulled from a lot of, buildings around downtown, and the hope and goal is it feels sort of timeless more than old or new, and that will help it blend into the streetscape. We didn't want to stand out as a new, shiny, modern building either. We didn't feel that was appropriate, but we also didn't want to copy something and make it feel like it was Disneyland. So it was a balance between those two things to create something that felt really appropriate and blended in properly.
Well, thank you. I yield, Gary.
Actually, one more thing to note. Sorry, Brandon. Back to your salvage comment. I think that's something we would definitely want to consider, and we really like the idea of being able to salvage things out of this building and have them be repurposed. I think that'll have to be a continuing discussion, and we're going to have to understand exactly how that fits into our scope of demolition and liability, et cetera. Because if you get guys in there with saws, obviously starting to cut out floor joists, that's a problem. So it's going to have to be a balance, again, between the economics of demolition and what we're able to go in there and salvage. So we want to continue to have those conversations.
And I have started that conversation with the Adams County salvage, so
Okay.
We'll see where that goes, but yes, definitely appreciate that.
Gary?
Suzanne?
Yeah, I think it's gorgeous. It's really beautiful structure. One of the things that I'm surprised at, though, is that there's not any, is there an elevator or ideas for an elevator? Or is the second floor space supposed to be a gathering area for the public? And if so, I'm surprised that, I don't know.
So by
I mean, the
code,
building's small, I
given
get
the
that.
size,
Yeah.
given the
Yeah.
size of the building, and it being under 3 stories and under 3,000 square foot per floor, there is an exemption for elevators in this
Okay.
particular instance. And depending on The intent is that it's not really a public space upstairs.
Okay.
It's potentially leased to an organization to use as office space, and there's going to have to be some understanding there. There's also an infeasibility, given the size of this building and the footprint, the height, etc., to easily fit an elevator inside of this building. So the intent is the first floor is the accessible public space of this building. We have definitely considered the elevator.
Yeah, they
Lot of
have
target.
some exterior, I don't know if they're made for public.
Yeah, they're lifts
large-
almost, and a lot of times they don't go a full 2 stories. You see them to get up to 3 or 4 or 5 feet off beams, size mechanical systems, etc., and then work through the specifications of exactly what that window is, which brick it exactly is going to be, etc. So we are in CDs for this project, yes.
So the construction that was mentioned beginning in August is not realistic or not planned?
For new construction or for the demolition?
I thought it was talking about construction beginning in August, 4 months of construction to be winterized, so that construction could continue through the winter, is what the application says.
Yeah, I don't think that's the intent at the moment. But they find out about the appropriations grant in October, so we're gearing up to have this ready by October. And then at that point, depending on the outcome of the grant, is how we would proceed.
If I may, just a point of clarity though.
Sure.
Is the project funded?
The project is, here, I'll answer that. So the project is funded, but not confirmed funding. I mean, that's 6 of one, half dozen of another, I realize. So it is in for congressional funding, but until the FY24 budget is finalized, I can't confirm that it remains in that budget for construction.
So that line that you currently have $102,000
No, that's cash we have.
currently,
Correct.
but
But
the
the-
overall project is estimated to be between, let's just say $1 million and $1.5 million.
Correct.
And you're looking for congressional funding to complete the rest of it.
1.534 is currently being written into the federal FY24 budget to fund construction of the entire
So
project.
Here's my hard question.
Yep.
If we approve the demolition requests now, and you go and demolish the building without having funding, I don't see how we could authorize a demo request in the absence of having guarantee or replacement of the building.
Understood. Yeah, no, I do understand. 2 things. My vision of it, and I'm overstepping, so yeah, jump up on me anytime, but would be a similar plan to what Max Felty did with the bus plan, that we would demo when
But
we
his
are.
project was funded.
Correct. But that's what I'm saying. When we know that we have funding, we wouldn't proceed with demolition, even with your permission, until we're ready to do that. So,
I don't know if we would be able to give permission until we had some certainty of a replacement.
Well, we've always asked or tied and asked the Borough Council, because of other errors that we made, to make sure that there was no demolition permit issued separate from the construction.
okay. Yeah.
So the construction permit has to be issued, otherwise we've ended up with holes in the borough for
Correct.
years,
Understood.
including the Ready project, which we hope is finally moving.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
Can I make a comment from here, or do you want me to go up there?
It's better to go.
If you can come up
Asking this
here,
to go up.
because they can hear you.
They won't hear you.
Come on. Yes, thank you.
I think the question of funding, this project has the endorsement of Fetterman, Joyce, and Casey. And so it's gone to the appropriations, committee for fiscal year 2024. In order for that funding to occur, the project has to be completed in 2024. What we're hoping to do is to be able to go to Joyce, who is one that took the grant proposal from us, okay, and say, hey, look, to further enhance the approval of the appropriation, we need to be able to show them that we have the lot, the land, within Gettysburg to be able to build this building. If we said, okay, we don't even have the approval to tear it down, our chance of getting the appropriation to build the thing is gone, okay? And there's no thought here where we want to take the building down and have it be, a ready project where nothing was built for, a prolonged period of time. It's not the idea. But we'd like to be able to coordinate it together, but it's very hard to be able to push for the appropriation without having the wherewithal to build the building. So it's a chicken or the egg type of thing in my mind. But we do have National Park Service endorsement. We've got the foundation endorsement, county official, state officials. As I said, Fetterman, Casey, and Joyce. We have a lot of support for this project, but there's no intent to do this at the expense of the borough and have an empty lot. So.
Well, I think in the end, you do own the building, you do have the property, you control the property. Our restriction would only be the building doesn't get torn down till construction starts. And you have a structurally sound building. And demolition would, we've seen how quickly buildings are demolished around here.
If that agreement could be done like that, and just, because that's our intention, okay? So if we don't get the appropriation through federal government, okay, then we have to go on a capital campaign. We're prepared to do that. We've met as a committee for a capital campaign. So if we need to go there, that's Plan B. Plan A, we would rather have the appropriation. The amount of money that was bannered about before, the 1.535 or whatever, that's being reworked as Connor has redone the project, reconfigured what the cost is going to be. We anticipate that cost to be lower than that amount. That's the amount that was put in for the grant, for the appropriation. We'd like to be able to go to Joyce, okay, sometime between now and October, saying, hey, look, we've met, the HARB has looked over the project. We have a conditional grant for, demolishing the building as long as we can take it down and build the other building, right after that, whatever that time period is. That's what I'd like to be able to do, so. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I have other comments. I will simply say that when you showed your slides and you showed that neighborhood, and I've been walking that block ever since this application was mentioned as being coming in and everything. And that, although that stretch of Baltimore Street, the building to the south has a commercial use, from the south to the drive to the school, those are commercial buildings. They're still residential in look. And everything up Baltimore Street looks like a residence. And there are still residences there, people trying to live. And this is a very commercial look. It changes the neighborhood. There's no other storefronts on Baltimore Street. And from the hill down, they're all just homes, and they all look like houses. So I wish it wasn't a storefront. The house, the proportion, the size makes sense, but that will interject the commercial, emphasize a commercial use, non-residential use. The windows, you said about the light spilling out, that becoming a gathering area. Right now, the house to the north is still residential. People are living on that street. When I came to Gettysburg, Steinway Avenue was a residential street when I moved. It was a wonderful residential street. And now I think I've been told there's 2 apartments on the avenue. Basically, no one lives there. As much as I like what's being done for the walk on Baltimore Street, this is very commercial looking. And I think it starts to change the character of the neighborhood. The other galleries, the other businesses are all in houses, and they've maintained the residential windows scale. So I'm not enamored with the commercial look, and your slides showed when you were doing the profile of the street and the roofs that this is suddenly a very commercial building, sort of in a still residential scale neighborhood with a very commercial front look.
Is there an opportunity to comment on that, Gary? I agree.
Sure.
I think it's the idea, it goes back to some of those slides I put up about the guidelines, and this idea we're not trying to mimic either. So this new construction building is commercial. That is what the building is moving forward into the future. And so I think there's a balance there between trying to mimic a residential look that existed previously, but also speaking to the future and the actual use of the building, the form sort of following the function and having the transparency of being able to see what's inside. And as you just mentioned, a place like Steinway Avenue went from residential to commercial, and a lot of Baltimore Street is also commercial and connecting up to the square. So there's obviously a blurring of those lines between commercial and residential at this point, and we weren't looking to just purely mimic a residential building. It also didn't seem quite appropriate for a public building that would welcome folks into it. You walk up to a solid wooden front door. Are you going into a house or are you going into a welcome center? So we wanted to convey the intent of what the building houses inside of it, and that's a public function at this location. So that's how we got to the design that we did.
Carly, what's the current zoning of this property?
This is residential office.
It's a residential office. So on the application right now, they have retail, office, and other commercial trip planning. And it's currently listed as a single-family home. So is it in
I think
the,
that's the use that they're proposing.
the zoning of this site location is tourist, commercial?
No.
No,
R2
it's residential
is
office.
residential.
Residential
Okay.
office, which is a mix of residential and commercial.
So the usage fits the current zoning of the location.
All right, any other additional follow-up questions? Yes.
Seeing it's all lit up and it's sort of getting nighttime and all that kind of stuff, how late will it be open? Is it open 24 hours?
No.
Lights go out at what time?
No, I'll answer that. We are working up an operational plan, but no, the intent is not to have it open 24 hours. It will have operating hours, probably. Some of those will be seasonally based on higher foot traffic. The bathrooms, the front lobby area, which would house, information and the digital kiosks and whatever else amenities of that nature, that could be locked separately from the restrooms. So the restrooms could be open later in the evening, accessible from that south side, but they would be secured, same as the bathrooms are secured in the parking garage, so that we didn't have overnight issues or things. And no, so they would have seasonal hours and be maintained. They couldn't be 24 hours. That would be inviting problems
So the
downtown.
front, maybe it's not going to look so lit up at night. when
I'm
you're
sure we could
closed.
work with some sort of lighting that it wouldn't be dark, but yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be, have all the lights on flooding out into the street at, midnight to,
Midnight, right.
to 5 in the morning or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
So does that help?
Right, thanks.
While you're up there, quick, Jill, the access to the restroom, as that is one of the governing sort of justifications for the structures, have you determined what the access schedule will be?
We've looked at other welcome centers in other highly trafficked historic towns and what they've done. It is very seasonable. Usually it's 8 or 9 in the evening, like in the summer, so kind of following daylight hours for the most part, and then opening, between 8 and 10, depending on which venues that you're looking at. So I think we could come up with a hybrid of those. I think the hours would be reduced in the wintertime.
Sure.
You know, that kind of thing. So kind of April through October would be the peak season that we see heavy usage.
One thing that Connor mentioned earlier, and you just reiterated, but the drawings do not bear it out. There was no door separating the front lobby to the restrooms. That hallway was a continuous plane. So your statement that you could lock the front of the building, provide access through the ADA compliant side door, doesn't look like that's currently what's in the plans.
I think
But it could, and that's also an interior discussion, so, you know, we can get into that, but the idea is it could be, and again, these are some of those evolving conversations, just like the solar panels, so that's been some of the more, you know, current conversation is exactly how this building is going to be utilized, and as Jill's been working on the operations plan, we can, you know, it's a door opening, so we can put a door there or a pocket door, some type of, you know, operable opening to close that area off, so that's a pretty simple design element to add into the project.
Just from my confirmation, Gary, we're being asked to approve the plan being presented right now for what in effect is a approval to proceed. And so the flexibility to which the PVs scare the hell out of me, to be blunt. The idea that your south-facing roof, which is the roof plane to the right, could have an entire plane of PV panels that are in the middle of the historic district, we've had yet to deal with that on any scale. And that just really is terrifying. So if you think about the walk there, the photography that we've seen, the view from this building is probably one of the more iconic views down that streetscape. And so that ambiguity about whether or not there will be solar panels on the building is, I don't know if it can be left open at this point in time.
Yeah, the intent is there's not solar panels, Brandon.
Okay, thank you.
So we can confirm that right now. That
Okay.
was an idea at a certain point in time, and that pricing you're seeing is dated at this point, but
Okay.
that's not the intent of the project, and it won't be in the construction budget for whatever is getting built in the first round. Again, that's part of the budget savings that we're looking at is cutting out things like that so that it's within budget.
And you see where I'm coming from, having ambiguities in the design to which we're being asked to approve, then later it gets implemented, and then everyone says, why'd HARB allow that to be approved? And we really didn't have a say in the design decisions. And so that's where having some of these things, at least from the conversation around the demolition request being tied to the construction and having firm construction plans and what the building will look like, are really sort of foundational to our ability to make a decision.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, but sort of within the scope of HARB, the interior floor plan layout and circulation, et cetera, is a little bit outside of that, you know, purview. So that's why I'm just trying to focus on, you know,
The exterior.
footprint, the exterior, et cetera, and some of those
With the one
operational
exception, that
circulation.
the
you know,
justification for the demolition of the building is the creation of the bathrooms. And
It's
so-
a visitor information center. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the intent. It's both of those things. It's an information center and bathrooms. It's not one or the other.
Connor, I didn't see either any exterior lighting.
There is some, well, there actually is exterior lighting. Oh, sorry. I'm talking pretty loud. They can probably hear me. Sorry. No, you're good. So yeah, there is, it's hard to see in that image, there is exterior lighting showing, lighting up the sign above with
Right
four
above.
small,
Okay, I do see it.
like wall sconces, and then that alleyway potentially will have subtle downlighting to light the walkway that leads to the rear of the building, and then the rear porch would again just have one simple like wall sconce next to the door. So it'll be minimal exterior lighting, mostly to eliminate that sign within the guidelines of what's allowed within the borough, as well as that sign that says Gettysburg Welcome Center. And from my reading of the rules, that sign is within the square footage of what's allowed, given the linear, the length of the building.
I feel like if for some reason the front of the building is closed and people are coming in the back, there has to be lighting for safety, right?
Exactly, yeah, that's the idea.
Not just one little light, but
Yeah, and we are working with electrical engineers,
Yeah.
et cetera, so there's standards and guidelines on
Yeah.
what that lighting has to be to meet code to illuminate the exterior of your building, so it's gonna be meeting those requirements. Obviously, we don't want it to look like, flooding with light either, so it's a sensitivity to where we're directing that light and making sure the paths are illuminated but not shining directly in someone's residence, et cetera.
Okay, so, I think where we are, and the board, we've occasionally disagreed on the best way to proceed, but I think where we are is we really cannot, there's too many details for the new building. That we can approve a concept, but we need to see the final drawings to see what the lighting fixtures look like, what the materials are, where they end up before issuing an approval, a HARB approval of the design. And I think, though, where we can go in, we're in the dilemma of having to approve a demolition which goes against our ordinance, basically. Our ordinance is set up to make it very difficult to demolish a building. We can, I think, indicate to the committee, the community, that we're willing to accept the emphasis on the fact that the demolition will result in a new building. There will be an improvement to the historic district, and the demolition is necessary to allow a project to occur that will have substantial public benefit, which outweighs the loss of the building. And the proposed project must occur at that specific site. So if we emphasize that, we can take the emphasis off the other parts, which would preclude demolition, because the existing building can be feasibly reused. It is not structurally unsound. We have all these things that we ask people to prove. Why can't the building be repurposed or retained? But I think where we are tonight is being asked to indicate that at least the HARB would be willing to recommend demolition approved to the final, or attached to the final approval for the construction of the building. That has to come through this board also, again.
And can we split those two out, or do we also have to make an approval of the land use certificate of appropriateness for the new construction?
We do not have to do a land use. I mean, the land use is actually the HARB component.
Right.
So that would be the HARB, the land use HARB approval of the design and details.
So your thought is to make a vote on a demolition request and then allow...
With no demolition until the permit for construction is issued.
And would we expect them to come back and present final plans to
Of
us
the
at that
building,
point in
yes.
time? I think I can get behind that.
Is that representative of where the board is?
Yep. So it's contingent on the, right, okay.
No demolition starts or comes down till the new building is permitted
Right.
and ready to build.
And paid for, sort of.
Well, I'm assuming they're not gonna start construction until they have money.
Yep.
So do you want to make this motion, Gary? I know historically you have
I
not.
usually-
Um,
Can you do that?
She's already written it down, so.
Yeah,
I'm kind of close, but go ahead and,
The Historic Architecture Review Board moves that a certificate of appropriateness be issued by the Gettysburg Borough Council for the demolition of the building at 340 Baltimore Street. When the final design has been approved by this board and the Borough Council, and the building permit has been issued, and that no demolition proceed until the permit has been paid for and construction is ready to begin.
I'll second that motion.
Can we add to that, that the board finds that will have substantial public benefit which outweighs the loss of the building?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, is that, it's been moved and seconded, and we are basing that on the fact that the project will have substantial public benefit, which outweighs the loss of the building. And the project must occur at this site simply because of the availability of the site. Is everyone comfortable with that amendment to the motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so let's vote. Let's do it individually. Joan?
Yes.
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 Okay. It'll be,
Thank you for your consideration tonight. I think that is where we needed things to land. The council will consider your recommendation at its June 10th, or July 10th meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
all right, Dave, thanks, guys. All right, so we're going to move on, so we don't end up with one of our longest meetings.
Number 6.
We will move on to number 6, which is the presentation on the proposed Gettysburg Station. We actually will be asked for comments on this. Carly and I have discussed, we will not be making a motion to the zoning board whether to approve or either for or against the variances. But we will indicate, based on the presentation tonight, any concerns we may have about the construction that's proposed or general support.
So I'm going to take a minute just to go over the process for this because it's new, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant's representatives to get into the details. But in 2018, the borough made a zoning text amendment related to the residential office redevelopment district, which is where the subject property is previously referred to in this meeting as the Ready site, now referred to as Gettysburg Station. And it was intended to make this property more attractive to development. And one of the provisions of that amendment was to allow, it was just actually to add a use the use itself was a mixed-use building of extended height, and there were several performance standards that would need to be met in order to allow extended height. And the maximum height in that district by right would be 48 feet, and then you could go up to 72 feet if certain standards were met. And since this was a height, other than in the institutional and industrial district, which has large setbacks and large lawns, it was a height that has not previously been provided for in the downtown. One of the provisions was that once an application for a special exception for that extended height was received, that application would be forwarded to Borough Council, the Planning Commission, and HARB for comment, to pass the comments along to Zoning Hearing Board. And the Zoning Hearing Board will be meeting on this next Wednesday. They have a hearing to review both the special exception application, which you are providing comment for, and also 2 variances. And the special exception application is for that extended height. The provisions that the ordinance allows for the extended height require that there either be internal parking, and I'll kind of detail these so that you understand as they present the plan how these relate. In order to qualify for the increase or extended building height incentive for this particular improvement, an applicant shall provide 25% of the required parking area within a building housing one or more permitted uses. The second would be if the existing transit center service operation and use to be relocated in order to qualify for the building height extended. It would have to be relocated on North Stratton Street, south of Water Street, or between Carlisle Street and North Stratton Street for the relocation of the transit center services, operations, and public restrooms. The third was public green space, providing a minimum of 25% area for publicly accessible use. And then the fourth was to build and designate a segment of the Gettysburg Interloop Trail Network. And so internal parking would come with a height increase, allowable height increase of 24 feet, relocation of transit services 12 feet, public green space 24 feet, Gettysburg Interloop 12 feet. And their plan proposes a mixture of internal parking, relocation of transit services and public restrooms, and also the Gettysburg Interloop. And so what we did with Borough Council is they reviewed the application, and we actually had one comment from one council member, but I can provide your comments individually or as a group, however you wish to forward those on to the zoning hearing board. That's the procedure. And then I can turn it over to you for the presentation. I don't know who wants to go first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Which image? I guess I should also clarify that this special exception is applicable to they're applying for this use on one building on the lot, and it would be, I think, building B on the plan?
B.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carly. Good evening. May it please the board. My name is Kurt Williams. I'm with Salzman Hughes in Carlisle. With me tonight is Alex Tweedy. He's the professional engineer and civil engineer for this project. Apologies from the project developer, Tim Harrison. Tim was here last night at the Planning Commission's presentation, but he's the incoming chair of a major hospital where he lives in New York, and he was in charge of giving a presentation, an award tonight to one of the physicians. So he was not able to be here tonight. We gave a similar presentation last night to the Planning Commission, and we're fortunate enough to receive their positive recommendation 5-0 in favor of the special exception that I'm going to be talking to you about, and also the variances. But our application to the zoning hearing board for your review and comment involves the Gettysburg Station Project. It's a mixed-use plan to be located between Carlisle Street and North Stratton Street in the borough's residential office redevelopment district. The project proposes a total of 186 residential dwelling units spread over 3 buildings, with the bulk of the units, 170 of them, being in the center building, the largest building, Building B, 8 dwelling units each in Building A, which is at the far end, and Building B. Additionally, there's a little over 7,000 square feet in restaurant floor space, as well as almost 8,000 feet of retail space spread across the first floor of each of the 3 buildings. This project, it's on the site that was formerly owned by the Industrial Development Authority, but Mr. Harrison's entity does own the property now, so he's committed to the project. It's not under option or anything, he actually does own it. The parking throughout the project is handled in several ways. There's a total of 129 parking spaces required for this project. We're supplying 195 spaces. 95 of the spaces will be in subsurface parking, 100 spaces in surface parking lots. As Carly mentioned, we're here tonight regarding the special exception for the height incentives. I think it's our expectation to be back to you next month for design elements. So we're not getting into that tonight. Whatever renderings you see, are going to see, and you see in the handouts that I gave you, are not what the finished product would look like, but these are more building massing drawings to show you where the buildings will be, what their general height will be, but not the finished surfaces of the outside, lighting, things like that. So our special exception request is for the height incentives. And as Carly mentioned, there are, we're taking advantage of 3 ways out of the 4 that are possible. One is internal parking, which could take you up 24 feet above the 48-foot, which is the allowable height of the building. Transit center relocation would allow 12 feet increase in height, and the Gettysburg inner loop connection 12 feet. We're actually very close on the public green space, but we're not quite there to meet that requirement. We don't need it, but it's nice to point out that we're just about there on the 25% green space for the project. No matter how many incentives we can meet, though, the building height is limited to 72 feet, no matter what.
Right.
So I'd like to talk, along with Alex, on some of the specifics of the project and where, how we meet them. Carly, could you go to, I think it's number 8, which is the site plan? Alex, you want to describe the location of the underground parking?
Sure. Alex Tweedy with Lancorn, I'm the civil engineer for the project. So this, Exhibit 8 is the site plan of the project. And as noted from the parking description, there's, I guess what we'll describe as 2 levels of parking. So on the site plan, on this lower level, this is what you would see, what you would feel to be the surface parking lot of the project when you enter in off Carlisle Street or off Stratton Street. But if you guys are familiar with the property, Stratton Street is actually at a lower elevation than Carlisle Street, and the property is higher at the railroad side and then has a slope down as you travel north towards the residential properties. The property kind of drops off. The design of this building takes advantage of that change in elevation, and portions of this, what feels like a surface parking lot, between buildings B and C on the northern portion of the property is actually an elevated deck that's supported above internal and covered parking that has direct access both into the central building and building C that fronts on Stratton Street. If you're familiar with the property on Stratton Street, you come over the railroad and Stratton Street starts to drop off as you head north. We take advantage of that topographic condition, and the entrance into the lower level parking is on the north side of the property, where you actually drive in what we would describe, I guess, as the basement level of that building. The building up on Stratton Street actually sits up on a plinth. You drive underneath the building, there's internal parking through that building, and then it continues through a covered parking court and gives you direct access into the central apartment building as well. Carly, if you pan up, that is shown in this inset A1 in the upper left corner of the building. This is the lower level of the parking court. It's a double bay covered parking lot, pretty simple circulation, but as you can see, this is building B on the west side. There's direct access into that building from the lower level of the dotted covered parking, and then there's a dotted line showing the outline of building C, which sits, above, but is integral to that parking deck. So there's direct access into both buildings. As noted, it's almost a 50-50 split. There's 195 parking stalls total, 95 in the lower, 100 in the what feels like a surface parking deck, which is a combination of at-grade parking and this elevated deck. Once again, that's 195 proposed, but it's only 129 required. So from a proportional standpoint, you've got 95 internal/covered parking deck against 129 required. So we well exceed that 25% threshold to trigger that incentive for the special exception.
And this improvement, the internal parking, allows the 24-foot increase in building height.
Correct.
Carly, if you could scroll back down again, please. The next incentive that we qualify for or applying for, is the relocation of the transit center. And the Carlisle Street, the transit center is currently located where Building A is shown to be in the future. Transit center to be relocated over here to North Stratton. The requirement in the ordinance for the incentive requires the transit center on Carlisle Street to be located to North Stratton Street, south of Water Street, north of the railroad tracks. So the railroad tracks run through here, transit center here on North Stratton, Water Street up here to the north. We're in discussions with Rapid Transit. They're in favor of it being relocated. It would be at the developer's cost, not the transit authority's cost. It'd be a new facility with public restrooms available. So that incentive allows for a 12-foot increase in the building height. And Carly, if you go to number 2, please. The third incentive that we feel we qualify for is the Gettysburg inner loop connection. And this is North Stratton Street. Carlisle is down at the other end. Of course, Building B here in the center. Railroad tracks. This is the inner loop connection here. It's proposed to be a 8-foot wide dyed concrete bike path. Connects at both ends of the property that we own. It's planned to be extended over onto the transit property as well. And Mr. Harrison does own the property where the transit center is to be relocated as well. So it'll transition over there as well. But the trail will be dedicated for public use, and this incentive allows 12 feet of building height. So if you add all the incentives together that we believe we qualify for, that adds up to 48 feet. But as I said, we're maxed out at 72. So that's where we would be. And that's again, only for the center building, Building B. Building A and C will remain at the allowable 48 feet themselves, with no height incentive planned for those buildings. So overall, in a harmonious sense, with buildings A and C being 48 feet, we've tried to build some transition of lower to higher to lower building across the site. The entire width here from the inner loop connection to the buildings is landscaped or parking, and lots of green space around the entire property, landscaping in the center of the surface parking lot. So we think it provides a lot of sunlight, adequate privacy, sky view, the least amount of shadowing possible for that building height and location.
What is that white thing at the end? Is that a building? Like at the
There?
Yep.
That's
Offsite.
I think that's a blocking of an adjoining property. And this is the proposed building, then there's 2 residential houses, and then I think this is just a massing of the existing building as you go down Stratton Street.
But I think it's too tall.
Yeah, it has to be. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, once
I
you get
mean,
outside of
the
building,
massing is too tall on that one because I think that's the housing authority.
It's the
building.
housing authority.
which is the former plumber's building, which is like.
Carly, could you go to number 6, please?
But that's fine. It's in this.
6 is a nice aerial view from over top of Carlisle Street here. Building A, B, and C down here. The inner loop connection, train station, and we're providing 30 feet of green space on the north side of Building B, again, to allow sunlight and the least amount of shadows intruding onto our property and neighboring properties.
In terms of the structure themselves, so the 72 feet, which is the maximum height, will not have any mechanical units, will not have any solar systems, will not have any antennas. There's nothing going to be on top of the building?
The code allows 72-foot base height plus an additional 12-foot for mechanical on the roof.
So now we're at 84 feet. With potential.
Oh, it's permissible up to 84 feet. We haven't designed the mechanicals. I don't know if we need the full 12-foot, but the code permits the 72-foot for the roof of the building plus 12-foot for mechanical. So we intend to comply with the code provisions for the allowable mechanicals.
Do you have a rendering that shows, like, from the Lincoln Diner, what that streetscape would look like? Like, so if you're across the street, looking at it, how, in relationship, like, to the train station and the hotel and all that?
Well, this one is the only one that shows a train station, but I believe 5. Is it 5 that shows looking down? Oh, no, that's the nighttime one.
Don't think so.
No.
That's pretty close.
This one on 6.
I mean, that's where the bus station is, that
Yeah, that's
building in the
basically
front.
at the
Yeah, you're
transit
standing
center
on
at
top
the
of the
train
roof of
station.
Lincoln Diner in that photo.
No, I mean like across the street.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so you can see what the height looks like in
At a
comparison
pedestrian height or something.
to
yeah.
the garage and the hotel and all
We
that.
don't have a view looking straight at the narrow side of Building A, the perpendicular stuff. Like, you're talking about directly across Carlisle Street, more or less.
So when you're facing it, you can see this project and then the train station, the garage, the hotel,
Oh, yeah.
all of that, what those elevations
Yeah,
look
we
like.
don't have a ground level, we just have that 6,
Yeah.
the aerial perspective.
So I do want to mention a few of the standards for the special exception that HARB would be particularly well qualified to comment on. So it's number 3, all mixed-use extended height buildings will be massed to fit harmoniously into its surroundings and respect and improve local character. They will minimize impact on nearby buildings and open space by massing new buildings to frame adjacent streets and open spaces in a way that respects the existing and/or planned street proportions, by creating a transition scale to nearby buildings, by providing adequate privacy, sunlight, sky view, ensuring adequate separation between building walls, and by minimizing shadows and uncomfortable wind conditions on adjacent or nearby lots and open spaces. And those are the criteria by which the zoning hearing board will be looking at this, so.
The question I have, okay, so looking at this rendering, that's a 3-story building, correct? The one closest to the street?
Building
Yes.
A is, yes, 3-story, 1-story of retail restaurant with 2-story of apartment above.
How tall are what is it floor to floor? Because that looks so much more massive than most 3-story buildings.
The code requires a
town.
12-foot minimum first floor, and then we're doing 10.5-foot floors above that. In this building, we might go as high as 14-foot, depending on the residential user, if a restaurant wants the use, but this would be within the 48-foot threshold. We expect probably a 13 to 14-foot first floor, and then 10.5 for the 2 residential floors above. 13 plus 21.
Building C is basically identical.
Building C is basically identical, but it has the parking garage underneath, so building C has that additional basement level, so that one's closer to the 40-foot threshold.
But this, for a 3-story building, again, with the extra building height floor to floor, our 3-story buildings in Gettysburg are probably closer to 30 feet.
Well, the code
Pitched
provision
roof.
requires the first floor to be 12-foot minimum. We can't really, we're going back and forth between 10 to 10.5 foot for the essential floors. I don't think we can really go much less than 10.5 to get the mechanicals and the ceiling height we want. So I think these buildings will probably be pretty close to as short as they can be to comply with code, with the requirements for the first floor building.
You wouldn't happen to know how high the train station is, would you?
I mean, those have to be at least 10 foot.
They have to.
Interior, I would say probably.
Well, the tower or something's not probably in that 36-foot range
Probably.
or something, maybe a little higher.
Out of all the buildings in the area, arguably the Gettysburg train station is the most historically significant structure. It also happens to be your adjacent landowner. So that structure where it's somewhat omitted from this view would be in the bottom right-hand corner, and its size would be comparable to the massing of that building right there.
Go back to 6, Carly, please.
Yeah. And so with the cupola on top of the train station, those are comparable in height. I think it's difficult to really sort of understand this without having the perspective from the ground level looking over.
And there's no doubt that the train station has to be at least 5 feet above that site because
From
of
grade,
the elevation.
yes.
Yeah.
I think it's great that you are chasing after all of the opportunities to improve the community. The design for all of the additional amenities is just outstanding. I think our concern historically has been the size of the building in relationship with the neighborhood that is there. It is a majority residential neighborhood. And in particular, while on Carlisle Street, we have a lot of commercial properties and mixed-use properties, and we have the new residential apartment building nearby, on North Stratton Street, that is majority residential properties. And in particular, on the, what would be the, I believe, the east side of North Stratton Street, where the Ready Station is being proposed, that is all residential neighborhoods. That's where the North Stratton property renovation for Duraz has been going on, and those houses in relationship to these structures are going to be dwarfed. And it's a challenge to how do you balance a historic residential neighborhood in the face of what appears to be a really large.
Maybe if the facades are different, it just looks so.
Yeah, I'm trying to
modern.
suppress that. He said these are not the final
I know,
facades.
I know, but it's
We're only talking about
overwhelming to
next
think.
month.
Yeah, we're only talking about height today.
Yeah.
And,
And our challenge is as a design board, I think all of us immediately go and see that and be like, that's way too modern for the structure. But
Well, you have to be careful because that is the construction of the day. It will be the most cost-effective rather than trying to build buildings that perhaps look older or something. So
I'll say that
you gotta
argument.
keep in mind that you're looking at the massing. But
Yes.
the design may not be too different. I keep looking at them thinking, what would it be if they weren't dark gray?
Right.
Well, they were colors more familiar to the borough, but.
Or stone, the stone that we have.
But we
all
know,
have.
like the building very close to the
The Carlisle Street building.
on the Carlisle Street, we don't have the image there, but the new apartments that were built just down the street on the opposite side,
Yes.
that's a 3-story building, massive, filled the whole lot. You know, it has some traditional element, but it's not as alien to the streetscape as I once thought it would have been.
It's almost like you don't see it, to be honest,
Well, and it's in
sometimes.
the roof line gets.
Yeah.
But it is a three-story building, correct, when you look at it?
How about
It is three-story.
the church on Baltimore Street?
You mentioned residential uses on Carlisle and North Stratton, and truth be told, this is a primarily residential project. It's 186 dwellings, studios, for one-bedroom, two-bedroom combinations, with commercial, retail, restaurants on the first floor. But it's a mixed use, but there's a lot of residential use here.
There is, but there are a majority of single standalone dwellings, which I think that is I think just sort of the challenge is in that neighborhood, it is just single-family homes. And this is going to be abutted immediately up to. And in particular, one of the things Carly mentioned was how sunlight impacts the neighbors, right? So if you think about it, there almost has to be a setback from these buildings to the point that on the northern side of them, how close are they to those adjacent homes? Like, they have the setbacks for the railroad tracks and the bike trail, all that, there's a lot of gap in there. But on the north side there, it appears, that doesn't appear to be more than 20 feet.
So I want to clarify too that those standards apply to the special exception, which is for the extended height, which is only the center building.
Right.
The other buildings would be subject to regular underlying zoning standards and heights.
Well, and that's what I'm speaking about, is the
center building.
seven-story building right there.
We didn't cover that in our introduction, but just to talk a little bit about how we came up with the layout of this site, which I think addresses some of your issues and some of your concerns. And once again, to clarify, the two buildings in front on the streets are not subject to the special exception that we're seeking on the 28th. So those are, quote unquote, by right height buildings. So really, the discussion for the zoning hearing board relates to the center building, which doesn't front on either of the two streets. Yep. But just when we looked at this site plan and we went through a couple iterations of it, I hear your concerns about this site. We could actually, by right, take this 7-story building and build it on Stratton or Carlisle with just a 20-foot step back on the upper levels. We recognized the nature of those streets and said, we want to do better.
And create that
So
sort of
part
effect.
of the discussions about massing of the buildings to frame the adjacent streets, create privacy, sky view, et cetera, our vision was focus that taller building in the center of the site away from the residential streets along Stratton,
Absolutely.
away from the streetscape, keep the smaller scale. Though they're bigger than what's there today, these are the by right buildings, not subject to the special exception. We kept those along the frontage to transition, so you go from 2-story single family, 3-story single family, to a 48-foot building, and then to the 72-foot building in the center of the site to kind of transition that scale. Relative to your discussions about the shading and the sky view and everything of the residential buildings, especially up along Stratton.
It looks like there's like 30 feet there.
Well,
I
so
mean,
this
based on
property,
this.
from property line to here is 35 feet.
Yeah.
There's a 5-foot minimum setback.
Mhm.
So as part of our discussions, this building, once again, could be 30 feet closer. We could build this building right off the property line from 0 to 48 foot. And we said, no, we want 30 foot of additional green space there.
Yeah.
So this building is 35 feet, whereas by right, at least from 0 to 48 feet, it could be 5 foot off that property line. And we recognized the uses around here, and we said, let's center these buildings closer to the center massing of the building and create more of that shadow buffer and sky view, et cetera, around the perimeter of these buildings, and try and keep that height clustered in the center away from, your residential concerns, et cetera.
So Google Street Map has done you guys a huge favor. They actually took a photo of Froth Alley.
Right.
Looking in there, and there appears to be a 3+ story apartment building on the north side of this, coupled with another 2-story building
Yeah,
that has.
this is the back of it.
It's
yes.
the back of it. So this would be that gap that we're talking about where the center mass of this structure is. So that is their adjacent neighbor with 30-foot setback. It's already a 3-story building plus the peak of its roof.
This building right here.
Yes. And then this building has no windows at all looking at the site. So from a sunlight perspective, arguably, they're not impacted at all. And that building, again, it's a pretty massive building in its own right. So if we're talking about the center mass building and the variance on that alone.
Special exception, not variance.
Special, excuse me, thank you. I was looking at that photo, it doesn't cause me any pause.
Remember, this is a redevelopment project.
It is.
The site's been vacant. If it was gonna turn into single-family homes,
So
it
this
would
is
have, but it hasn't.
standing,
So
looking out the back of that building, right in the middle of
it's a
the lot.
redevelopment opportunity.
That is a huge building
Do you want me to
already
bring
there,
up the Google Street
and
view?
that building has no windows on it. And so that is the north side of this, so that's what would shade these buildings. Now granted, this place isn't gonna have a particularly great view, but I don't know if they have a great view right now either.
The only area across Stratton Street is that one part, which is now a parking lot,
Yes,
but not,
So this is what
yes.
he's saying, that's the 3-story building,
right.
and then that's the end of the old plumbing warehouse that
Correct.
has apartments, but they look east and west, not
Correct.
south.
And this is the location.
That
of
would be the location right there. Everything else is supporting infrastructural parking for all the other lots. Fine with this. I'm not sure what we have to make a motion or what you're looking for.
No, I told Carly that we would provide comments, and
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
ask board members to do that. I'm not gonna ask the board to officially say we approve.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with that, because we deal more with building details.
Signs, yeah. My only concern out of everything is the White House in the distance up there.
Matt's.
Matt Sheed's house.
Yes.
Matt
That
Sheed's.
structure is going to now be adjacent to the bus depot and have the bus loop passing through them. And so I am sure they're probably very concerned by the proposal. But again, as part of a revitalization project, this is a really huge opportunity for the community.
Mr. Chairman, did I hear you say you're not comfortable with the HARB giving a recommendation as a board? Did I misunderstand
wasn't
you?
gonna ask us to make a motion, but do you need that?
You can, or we can just do comments. With planning commission, we always have a recommendation because they're required to anyways with special exceptions and variances. But with borough council, we just did individual comments, which we only had one person that provided a comment. So I can do comment, we can forward comments as a board, or I could even just, individually, like provide them a letter with individual comments. And I'll, of course, provide that to you in advance so that you can review it. Before I send it.
I just want to note the language of the ordinance says that forward to the Gettysburg Planning Commission, Gettysburg Historical Authority Review Board for the issuance of a written report with recommendations from each body, if applicable. I don't know what's applicable or not, but it seems to be asking for a consensus or a motion or something from the board as a body.
Could you read that again?
After setting a date for the zoning hearing, the zoning officer shall concurrently refer the application for review to the Gettysburg Borough Council, the Gettysburg Borough Planning Commission, and the Gettysburg Historic Architecture Review Board for the issuance of a written report with recommendations from each body, if applicable.
I don't think
So I
that's
would-
asking for something, I think that's just asking if we have recommendations, right?
So I would say if you don't find that to be applicable, we can forward comments.
I mean, I don't want to speak
it's
for
up
the
to you.
board.
Yeah, I would rather, if
Where
you
would-
all,
where-
if you're all on the same page, then I'm happy to forward a unified letter with a recommendation. But if you want to provide individual comments, then that's fine too.
I guess, I mean, we could, it would not be super supportive, but I mean, I'd be willing to put a motion that the Gettysburg Historic Architecture Review Board took no exception to the special, took no exception to what was presented for the height of the center building. It just says, it's not hugely supportive,
Right.
but it says, based on what we saw, we did not take exception with the request for the special exception.
I could support that.
I would second that.
You all right with that?
Yeah.
Are you all right with that? Basically,
I'm okay with it, but I'm curious why you're not supportive of the application.
because the height and everything, I guess it would, for the same reason, Connor's sitting there and you've got an engineer sitting here. That's 70 feet height. When that building is finally detailed out, could be very attractive or very offensive. And we deal with historic architecture. We deal with architectural review. We review what the building looks like. We review what you do to address that massing.
But we're not doing the detail tonight.
Right.
We're showing you how we're complying with the ordinance that we didn't write. The Borough Council wrote it. We think we're complying with the ordinance, and we're asking for your blessing to say, yes, you are complying with that section of the ordinance to achieve the 72-foot height.
Well, I think.
I understand you may have
So
difficulty
what
or
I'm
different.
saying is, we're looking at this massing that some people are objecting to because they're saying, these buildings this is just too big. But your Historic Architecture Review Board is saying, we're taking no exception to what was presented. We're neutral on it. We're not going to go in opposition to it. I've been asked to be opposed to it by some of the people that have seen some of the preliminary. And I'm looking at it and thinking, this can work. With the special exceptions, this can work. And therefore, I think you've met the process. And we're not objecting to it. We're not saying no. We're taking no exception to what's presented here, knowing that we're going to see much more detail later. The Planning Commission, which is a critical one, has said yes. And we'll make a motion that we'll go on record as a board that we take no exception to this. That
The height's required.
Application for these zoning exceptions, we don't object to them. I know you want more, but to me, that's pretty, from a Historic Architectural Review Board, looking at a 7-story building in the middle of its historic district, that's pretty positive.
I'll take what I can get. Thank you.
That's where I am. I don't want to speak for the board that, but we're all here, I think, have heard things from people, it's just too big or something, but looking at what it's done and with our experience with buildings, we're just going to say we take no exception with this request. So, I will do a motion, and then you'll have where we stand as a board.
Thank you.
I would recommend that the Gettysburg Historic Architecture Review Board goes on record as saying it has reviewed the preliminary presentations developed for the zoning special exceptions, and as a board, we take no exception to what we have seen presented to us.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Thank you for your
Thank you.
time
Thank you
tonight,
for your
attention.
patience. And
Appreciate it. Yep.
Is that all we need?
Yeah?
We're gonna break our record tonight.
That for that, yeah.
All right, so
Wait until next month.
we continue.
Why don't you take the stone from the house on Baltimore, the old stone there, and give it
That'll be enough.
Okay, there we go.
And just for my reference, you said next month they are presenting the final drawings for what this will look like?
They currently, I think the intention is to have an application for your agenda for next month.
Okay. We look forward to
That is the
That's the
plan.
plan.
We'll,
I think they'll be looking for us to give much more architectural recommendation at that.
And at that point, I would like to have, I understand that
It's a lot to decide in one night.
it is, and typically we get it 4 days in advance, and half the time you can't open it, or you didn't get all of it, and so it would be nice to just have more time to digest it.
All right. We can remind them that they're supposed to give it to them 3 weeks before the meeting.
That would actually be helpful.
that was my fault this time.
Fair enough.
No. Okay. Administrative approval since last meeting. And I have talked with Deb. There were a number of smaller projects that got classified as minor. I know Brandon did question the one and had it clarified about some window replacement, but they were replacement bad windows. They were replacing replacement windows that were wrong, so.
But just to be clear, we are a design board, and so a wrong window replaced with a modern wrong window is still a wrong window. And my frustration is, as the number of administrative approvals increases monthly, it seems that we are losing our design input where we have an opportunity to fix some past wrongs. And so I emphasize with Deb that even in her administrative approvals, the fenestration of a window, the mullion patterns of the windows should be taken into consideration. And a full light window in an old house that has no mullions in it, I feel is inappropriate from a design perspective.
Don't you think she's doing that? Or do you know if she's doing that is the question?
When I asked her about this window question, they were just replacing what was there with the same exact window. And my suggestion to her is, much like Connor did in the visitor center, was the pattern of the grids makes a lot of difference in how, if he had no grids in that building, it would look modern. And so, and a perfect example is the structure on West High Street that recently renovated offices between South
doctor's
Washington.
office?
It is an extremely modern structure in the middle of one of our oldest neighborhoods in town. And so I just want to emphasize that administratively approving bad things is still removing our design right away.
Okay. And some of that concern I've also expressed.
I don't remember having that presented to us.
It was
Yeah,
actually.
we talked about that.
We
The
missed
one
2
on-
meetings, so
which
these
one? West High Street?
Oh,
approvals
It
are
was.
cumulative.
gotcha.
I think what
I
happened
think I was
was
absent that day.
They changed,
no,
they revised some things as they went.
well, and the building was deemed not in the historic district. It was younger than 50 years.
Well, it's still.
And so what
reviewed.
happened, it got slid over to an administrative approval because of that. And now what we're left with is a very modern building surrounded by our period homes.
That's not in Elm Street?
Oh, it should be.
I think it's in Elm Street.
It is.
So again, and if you look on here, we're up to V. So there are 25 administrative approvals. And one of the ones that has me a concern right now, in the first block of West Middle Street, they replaced a 3-story balcony that, from a code enforcement perspective, was a nightmare to begin with. And the new structure that's in there They're supposed to replace it in kind. You know what was there? That was a screened-in porch. And so I have no confidence that it's going to be a screened-in porch when they're done. I'm expecting pressure-treated spindles on railings.
No, that was they were supposed to be in tonight.
No, that's the adjacent building, 33.
But then they also provided, they're trying to restore it back to the open balcony that would have been there before they screened it, with the railings that they had removed that were.
Which house
Right,
is this?
you're
Is that
right,
next to
but
the
it's
parking lot?
in,
Next to the parking lot?
It is not. The one that was on our agenda tonight, 33 West Middle, is 2 buildings over. And so I pulled it up earlier. That's why I can be so emphatic about it. But that's the building, that
right,
33.
and it's basically the same the properties are contiguous. There's your porch.
Well, technically, they're 2 standalone properties because there's a grocer's alley right down
they're
this.
contiguous.
But my concern is that porch right there, and this is a question for the board in general. I don't know when that porch was put in. But being said, that is what was there. And so I am very concerned what we are going to end up with is a pressure-treated, modern decked with a spindled railing that meets all of the current code requirements, but doesn't look like that. And that's it's a very heavily presenced building. And so I don't even remember discussing this, because you know what? It just got approved in kind. And I don't even think it's on this list. Because I think that would be.
They took it down quite a while ago.
Yeah, well, it was last month, 2 months ago, when we didn't meet because there was no approvals.
Right.
And so my concern is it just appears that we are accelerating approvals on some elements in the core of downtown, historic downtown, that impact the appearance of the structures.
All right, then we can ask, we can,
I do know there was an email on May 10th that listed the administrative approvals at that time, and then some of these were added since because it went from May to June.
Correct.
So,
Do we have a reference to that particular property? I think all it is replace a dilapidated in-kind deck. And so it's just, as decks go, it's a very large deck.
is it 43 East Middle Street?
I think it's 29, according to what Carly has up there.
Yeah,
That
because
permit
Applebee's
might have
across,
actually gone
Applebee's
through
28,
last year.
Correct.
across the street.
Is it 43 West Middle, replace the previous wood
That's
railing
not
with a
it.
new
Yeah, it's not
pressure-treated?
it.
Okay,
It has to be
that's not it.
29, Karen. And so, and again, it's still in mid-flight, and I don't know what's going to end up in there, but I'm almost positive it's not going to look like that. And so anything that doesn't look like that isn't in kind.
yeah,
Right.
but, yes.
I just want to say that it is possible, and I believe that this is the case, that they pulled their permits quite a while before they started work. So it might have actually been a last year, end of last year, or very early this
It
year.
never came in for communication.
Um,
But again, if it
Well,
was
no,
administratively
yeah,
approved,
right.
it would.
But I'm just saying that's why, that's not on your list tonight.
Yeah.
When they, yes, so, not being super familiar, but when they got into it and doing some of the replacement, they discovered wholesale structural failure.
Yes.
And they had to redo the footings, the foundation. What's in place now are columns and decks that repeat the
Structure.
column line you see.
Yes.
The painted green verticals and the
But
decks.
there's no roof down on the first story. Now it's just a straight column up through this mass.
Right, the roof was an overhanging roof that was
Yes.
tacked on. But, so the grid pattern of structure is going to be the same, but I do think their intent was to restore somewhere they had evidence that the original 3 stories were open porches with with railings about the height that those were there, and then open. So you'll see the original brick building behind. But it's not gonna be pressure treated deck. But it may, I don't think we understood in the end that the look was gonna be radically different. But they're not replacing the screening on top.
They're not returning the screen. Or
They're not putting the
restoring
screen
the
back
screen.
in.
Or they're not using the solid panels on the bottom.
No.
So they're most
using-
likely just gonna go back to what is a modern deck with railing.
That would be beyond the ability of the administrative approval, I would believe.
I would think so as well. And so this is just, it just so happens this structure is immediately in downtown.
You see it big.
It's big. And so it just, I bring it up as a point of concern. I don't want to beat it to death, but
I have to echo your concern because it seems like every month the administrative approval list gets longer and the to-do list, not that I mind a short to-do list, but the to-do list for the HARB gets shorter. And we know less and less about the projects that go on. When it comes to the building department, if it's got a certificate of appropriateness, you've got to assume that that's been approved by the Director of Historic Preservation or HARB. I'm familiar with the HARB stuff, but not necessarily with the administrative approval.
correct.
So it could conceivably come through my office, get built as a modern deck.
Right.
Honestly, I don't think that building, I mean, I think originally it had to have been an open deck. I mean, that's what it looks like.
Well, the brick addition on the back
Was
is a
newer.
much later and significant
Yeah.
one to the house, and the structure probably filled in when that was built.
Right.
but-
Maybe we could bring
Okay.
it up as a next month's meeting when Deb comes back, just to get clarity on it. But right now, you're asking us to approve 25
I think in the
administrative
9th it was open.
approvals.
I think we
In the
should
90s
table
it
that
was
until she
open.
comes back.
I like that, Clem.
Then we'll move on to the reports. We'll table the administrative approvals.
Do you think we should do that for all these people who need new roofs?
They've already been issued the approvals. We're just
Oh,
being,
okay, all right.
we're just
I was
acknowledging
gonna
that they've
say,
been
I feel like
approved.
if somebody needs a new roof and it's on the schedule here or whatever, it should be done.
These administrative approvals, I mean, we never get to see them. We
Yeah.
just verify.
So what are
that
you
what
saying?
she
We're
did
just
is
not gonna,
appropriate.
I say for right now,
we're just not
su-
gonna talk through.
I would say, no, we actually have to make a motion to approve them. And I
Right.
would say, to Clem's point, I say we table the administrative approvals for the month of June and discuss it next month. There's another one on this list in here that I can just give you, 147 West Middle Street. Deb contacted me about it because they wanted to put industrial agro roofing on the house. And I said, I can't support that.
Oh, really?
And I told her that I want the same crimped 5V Harner that we had on Hanover Street, right across from the Sunoco station. That roof is a flat panel and is very sort of reminiscent of an old roof. And so this results here is because she communicated that to the owner and said, this is the roof that would be approved by HARB. But that happened with no discussion of this board. This just happened between us. And I can imagine there are several on here that Gary has actually communicated with about as well. And so I'd like to table this and we'll bring it up next month's meeting.
Gary, do you remember, was there a time when, like, you and the director would meet to discuss the administrative approvals prior to the meeting?
No, not officially, regularly.
Okay. I couldn't remember. I know I think in the past, and there were more regular meetings.
We should just go ahead and table it, and, because this is an accumulation of 3 months. And many of these are replacement in kind and things that, we know that there were council saying, you know, we want as many things approved, you know, basically administrative as we can.
Correct.
And so we just have to say, no, we need to pull back a
We
little bit.
have to clarify her latitude on
Right.
approving stuff,
Right.
Yes.
which she
She's-
doesn't understand, I
Right.
think.
She's in a position of trying to, you know, Carly was in on that, some of them too, when they were saying they wanted certain windows, doors, everything pre-approved, so that they could just be approved without coming to the board. There was some pressure from Wes Heiser, the president at the time. And we've kind of explained that that undermines the whole intent of the HARB, just to do that kind of wholesale pre-approval of replacement products. So looking at this, there's a couple that we probably should have looked at preliminarily. So let's just have the discussion and make sure we have an understanding. All right?
Agreed.
So do you have a motion to table at least the approvals so we can use them as a discussion next
I think Clem made that motion, and I second that.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Are there the report, Joan? I'll go right down to yours. Do you have a report?
I surely do.
Good.
And I'm gonna just pass these on down. I just printed off. I don't have how many I've got here. Let me get.
I can share if you don't have enough.
Take a look at that. So, a couple weeks ago, there was, the Arts Council had somebody that was doing a 2-hour walk of the town to talk about Italianic.
Italianate.
Thank you, Italian.
There you go.
Historic stuff, right? And it was very interesting. It was very interesting. The gal, I can find my stuff here. Oh, sugar. Wait a minute.
Nancy Whitman.
Thank you very much. And it so happens that we had, oh, you kept that, so good.
And I took notes.
I know, but I'm trying to find my notes here. Okay.
Lost your 25 bucks.
So that particular style is inspired by 16th century Italian Renaissance architecture, combined with picturesque influences from the farmhouse of Tuscan countryside. Doesn't that sound really? It began in England in 1830s, and it had its heyday here in Gettysburg area from 1840s to 1880s. After that, it was passé. I got to do something else. So it had characteristics, and you can walk around town, and I'm going to have a little quiz at the end. Basic characteristics is it's either a second story, which would be residential, or third story. It has sloping roofs in the back, and it's got deep overhanging eaves with substantial cornices and decorative brackets. All the windows are tall and narrow, and with elaborate window crowns over each one. Now, what we noticed as we walked around town, on a third story, the first 2 stories had the nice crown on it, and sometimes the third story was eliminated. It was just plain, you know, like they just didn't want to do that. There's a lot of cupolas and square towers on the top of all these. So if you take a look at what I showed you, there's also a lot of, I call these bay windows, but you know, they came from that style. And you'll notice on some of the buildings, they're on the second floor, these actual bay windows, and it's all with the same cornices. There is porticos on the top, which could be just over the door or the whole length. Single-story porches, porticos, and bump outs, I'll call them. Now, the interesting thing is around the 1840s, don't quote me, or so is when the railroad came to town. So I think that's pretty much when we started. But here's the two big questions. How many of these style houses or buildings are there in Gettysburg?
25.
If you are in jeopardy, you're going to need to know this answer.
I say 4.
25.
Okay.
125.
No, there's 95.
Whoa.
95 of these around town in different styles and shapes and colors and everything else. And what street do you think has the most?
South Washington.
Carlisle.
Washington.
You've only got 3 others to pick, okay?
Baltimore.
Baltimore.
Nope. It's Chambersburg
I was
Street.
gonna say,
If you
Chambersburg
start at
Street.
right at Lincoln Square, and you go all the way
To the
down.
seminary.
In fact, we are in that style here. If
Yeah.
you go outside as you leave, it's got the hanging over the top with all the porticos.
Well, the courthouse was Italianate, the school across the street is Italianate.
Right.
This
right.
is Italianate.
Right, right. So it happened at that time, but after, like, the 1880s, there was no more. I don't know what the next style was.
The Evergreen Cemetery Gatehouse is Italianate.
Yep.
Right, right.
Second Empire.
But the thing is, if you look up, if you walk down Carlisle and around, these first, but if you look up to see all the ornate around the windows,
Yeah.
they're all, I believe they were 2/2s.
Yep, 202.
And, and it's very ornate, and then all the quinions that basically have on the side of the building with the, that's the plaster that sort of wraps around the
Oh, yeah.
corner with the brick in between, so it looks like a zipper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like both sides
Yep.
of a zipper and so forth. But that's all distinguished, and all these, all you have to do is look up, and you can see all the different styles and all the different, and not any one of them is the same. They're all different. They're all really different. So that was it. So we got 2 CEs. Thank you very much.
It sounds like you had fun too.
Well, you know what the fun part was? There was a gal on there that was a downtown tour guide. So as we would go to the house, she had all the history on it. So that was the fun part, we could just put it all together. So it was really fun. And I think that Deb's trying to get her to come and maybe do some other styles or something that we can get some CEs for, which was good. So that's all I have, so you can take a look at all that, or you can toss it in the wastebasket, whatever.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brandon, did you,
Okay, so I attended the Planning Commission meeting last month, and in speaking with the county representative, I highlighted the Evergreen Gatehouse as an anomaly in terms of both our records and, in particular, its lack of emphasis. I also spoke with the Pennsylvania State Historic Commission, and the individual I spoke with reminded to me that not only is Gettysburg in a historic district, we are also in part of a larger architectural district that goes through the battlefield. And he said, because we are all part of this same district, by right, every property in town is registered in the historic district. And he said there's no necessary need to singularly put a structure on the National Registry, but he said in certain circumstances it benefits the property owners. So I met with the Evergreen Cemetery board and spoke with Mike Strong and Tim Smith regarding their property. And one of their concerns right now is they are getting ready for a capital campaign to restore the building. And they are somewhat concerned that, one, they're going to be able to raise the funds for the building, and two, the level of detail the building will require for restoration. And out of all of this, I was speaking with Carly at the meeting, and it turns out that on our historic map for the Gettysburg Architectural District, that building is actually omitted. And it is not part of our district. And so, I think the next thing we discussed was the most prudent thing would be to annex the Evergreen Gatehouse into the Gettysburg Historic District. And to do that, I believe will require a borough ordinance to add it in. And so my thought was we discuss the need, and if so, present a motion that we would like to annex it into our historic district. And as a sort of simultaneous process, the board at the Evergreen Association is beginning the process to register the building on the National Registry. And together, and if you notice, it is that thing right there. And so for whatever reason, the map stops at Max Feldy's property when it abuts the National Cemetery and does not continue. And so it is an orphan in our overall map. I think that from an architectural perspective, the building represents probably the Italianate style for the borough. From a history perspective, that building is one of the key icons for the Battle of Gettysburg. The imagery of it is what people think of for a very long time. And when I went to the opening of the new Historical Society, there is an entire section dedicated to the Evergreen Gatehouse and its importance to both the community and at the time of the battle. So I think we would be remiss if we didn't try to assist them in terms of bringing some attention to their property. And furthermore, I think there is an opportunity for us to really highlight Gettysburg. Adding that structure into the National Registry, I think would probably be the premier addition to the registry, and I think it would bring a little bit of notoriety to the community. So, and I thought the planning session went very well. The representative from the county was very interested in figuring out if there are any other structures that we are concerned about in the community. And honestly, the map is pretty, defined in terms of the historic district. And while there are other buildings that are worthy of being in the district, I don't think we want to undertake trying to change the entire district.
No.
So,
Yeah, there's the list of the
one-offs.
buildings that are added, and it should be a way for us to at least add the Evergreen.
So that's my ask, is since there is an opportunity for us to put a singular enumerated building into the historic district, much like we did with the Schultz House, I think that would be a good step for us to basically, one, fix what historically right now, they have honored the board. You even said they come into the board and act like they're part of the historic district getting approvals. When in right, I don't think they need to. And that oversight in its own is somewhat scary.
Well, and you talked to Brian, right?
I did.
To Ken Williams. All right, so
I have the full support of the board. They were unanimous that they would like to actually bring some attention to this. And I think from our perspective, I don't know what the level of effort it would be really to add a singular structure to the historic district. I think a motion from our organization, as defined in our meeting minutes, requesting Borough Council consider the annexation of the Evergreen Gatehouse to the Gettysburg Historic District, I think would be sufficient. And then the council can debate and deliberate whether or not they want to undertake this on their own agenda.
I'm okay with that, as long as we're not demanding that they do it without making sure parties are on it, but ask them to pursue that addition
A recommendation.
to our ordinance. they'll let us know if that's more complicated than we think it is.
I mean, are we changing, we're changing zoning, we're asking
But,
them.
but we're already being told,
It's the historic
Yeah,
district ordinance.
Right,
Well, they're not in our historic district. They are in
Correct.
the federal historic
National.
district, which is like 3 surrounding square miles.
yeah, the National Register Gettysburg National Battlefield Historic District
Correct.
is what they're in.
And I think from our perspective right now, if they're going to undertake a capital campaign to renovate that building, it, technically they're complying out of sort of their own voluntary efforts. There is no need for them to come to this board. They can just apply for a land use permit and technically get an approval from the building authority to do whatever they want. And I think from our perspective, given the significance of that building, that we're yielding what again is our review right in the community.
Well, I would want to do it more as an honor to them. to
Honestly,
include them.
yes.
Let's think of, let's do it, let's put it on the July, let's have a written motion that we work out
Okay.
to consider for July.
I like that. And again, this is just a recommendation to Borough Council to annex the building.
Well,
So-
let's find out, because I know Deb's also working with getting some grants. We're supposed to be doing updated reviews of the district and
It is.
buildings. We're supposed to, we're supposed to do that as being part of a certified government. We're supposed to do periodic reviews of the district to see if there's things that should be changed or altered.
I think you also have a pending ordinance amendment relating to satellite dishes, so it's possible we might be able to,
I thought that was already approved.
it's being drafted.
Oh, I thought I was actually at the Borough Council meeting where they approved the satellite ordinance.
They authorized the solicitor to draft the ordinance.
Okay.
So it hasn't gone through, and that's where it is, it's being drafted. So if it's something, if it's the historic district that ordinance, that change was made to, and you want to
Oh, I
make
see
an
what you're
additional
saying.
change.
Since they're already gonna modify the district
Yeah.
ordinance, it may be an
If Harry was
opportunity
comfortable, I
for.
mean, the two topics are very different, but if he was comfortable, you might be able to put out the
I think
same
half the
ordinance
battle is
change.
just getting it on the council's radar that it is something that we've identified in terms of being omitted from the overall map. And it is, like you said, an honor to the Evergreen Gatehouse itself from an architectural perspective.
Joan?
I had one thing that I wanted to bring up, I won't take long, all right, is historical markers.
It's gone.
Did they take it down? Well, he's getting it corrected. Who, first of all, so I'm sort of seeing about historical markers. Now, I looked at the one that was in front, the one of,
Of your building?
before I go to.
the post office? What are you saying?
Okay, in front of the brick house.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
He put up 2 signs,
He did.
all right? So I don't know if he came through here for approval of those signs.
I think there was a request to see if there was a sign ordinance submitted. I didn't get a response back on that, so I do not believe
He
a
is
sign.
quite interesting, that's all I can say.
Yeah.
And he had wrong information on the historical sign. And it's the black sign,
Yes.
you know what I mean, historical. The one in front of the courthouse is not, it's a, what's it
That's a
say?
Pennsylvania State Historical
'Cause that's a
Commission
whole
sign.
But what's interesting is, on that one and also the black one in front, they had the QRS code.
They did.
And when you click on it, you can reserve a room at the Brick House Inn.
So just to give you a little bit more context, several community members, historians, licensed battlefield guides, brought up several weeks ago that our Brick House Inn, who is under new management by a national ghost company, put out in front of their building a replica of a Pennsylvania State House historic marker that had let's just call it errors in historical fact.
The date, it's the important date, okay, was wrong. So he got a lot of feedback.
He
And
did.
you?
But you think he actually took that down to correct the sign?
I
He
think
did
so.
not take it down because someone from the borough
Well,
requested it?
I don't know if that happened.
Do you guys
but
know what we're talking about?
He
Okay.
basically said he was correcting it.
Okay.
So he had the wrong date. And then there was another sign in front of it, and
That's
I
still
don't,
there.
huh?
It's still there.
I don't remember
I haven't seen it.
us even approving any of that. It's not
So
on.
signage like that, I don't think we actually get a review right of it. It would go through the borough sign ordinance just to request it. It counts against his square footage for advertising. However, what he wants to say on the sign is really up to the individual business.
I know, but
I can give some clarity.
please
So historic markers actually don't require a signed permit, but they do require a certificate of appropriateness. So when the application came in, it was for a historic marker and a certificate of appropriateness was issued. And then we later pointed out that that it was not a historic marker, that it was actually an advertisement. And so they were going through the process to get an actual signed permit. We can't dictate the content of a sign, it's free speech, but we, as I'm sure several community members have encouraged them to correct the sign.
Well, the fact is somebody's gonna say it's a historic sign. Shouldn't somebody be able to read it first? Before, just saying.
Well, it sounds like what Carly said, historic signs don't even require a permit.
They require a certificate of appropriateness.
But that doesn't allow anybody to vet the content of the sign.
No. Well,
And is the
So I
certificate of
just-
appropriateness coming through HARB for approval, or is that being
The
administrative?
signs
Administrative.
That would be
aspect of it has
administrative.
been done administratively for
Correct.
years.
And actually, I think the only certificate of appropriateness review at this point for signs is just for historic markers. It's not for regular signs. We just use the sign ordinance because we can't regulate content. And there wasn't really a basis to change anything other than what was required on the sign ordinance. So I think Deborah had opted not
Does
to
anything
do-
limit them from saying on their sign that Abraham Lincoln stayed in this building?
No, I mean, no. I mean, I can't, unless there's vulgarity, we can't infringe on someone's free speech. I mean, obviously, we can say that it's inaccurate, but
Right.
Up to him if he wants to. It's not against the law.
yeah.
And in the historic district, adding a historic marker in the front of a historic yard, is that in a review right of the historic board?
Do you want it to be?
No.
There you go.
I can tell you, I received several phone calls. Obviously, you received a few phone calls too.
Were they
and-
saying that Lincoln slept there? Is that?
No. I'm just saying, that's the logical next step, is
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, you need to have some good ghosts staying in your
Yeah,
hotel.
let's consider that, but I'm not sure about that. You know, the controlling years ago, and we need to end years ago, all these Civil War plaques that are on the building, people paid for their Civil War plaque, and they went in, and all they did was look at the insurance maps,
Yeah.
they'd look at and they say, oh, yep, there was a building there. And many of them, it wasn't the same building. So people have all these Civil War
Ready,
plaques
site.
without having to prove anything. You know, that and the buildings that were on there were not the ones, and so they'll say Civil War building. And a few families over the years, when it was pointed out that they didn't have a Civil War building, returned the plaques. But there's a lot of others that say that buildings were part of the Underground Railroad. And it's kind of like everybody wants to be part of the Underground Railroad. And there's very little chance, except for a couple in our area, that they were part of it at all. So, you know, but they'll say, I don't know that we want to get involved in limiting reading that content.
It's actually a good reminder, though, that the same individuals that are concerned about this, there are a number of those Civil War building plaques around town that they have yet to address those either. So the next time one of the licensed battlefield guys start yelling at me, I will remind them of that. That is a good point to bring up.
We're dragging on. Anything of significance to come before the board? Thank you, Joan, for that. I wasn't aware of all that.
No, thank you, Gary. I am
All
very
right,
happy.
thank you. Again, we'll meet.